Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. I don't understand what the problem is. If I am 43 years old and I have never been married and I have no children, for some reason, my relatives don't like this situation at all. Their only desire in this life is to help me start a family. But how can they not realize that help is needed only when they ask for it? I have never regretted being single for a second. Not having children is such a gift from God. In fact, it's entirely my fault. I've always been careful. Protection above all else. Otherwise, at some point in your life, your potential children will come to you from all over the country, even from places you've never been. The mother, of course, is the one who worries the most. Even when my father was alive, she constantly tried to organize meetings with potential candidates for the role of my wife. All this looked as if, quite by chance, the daughter of my mother's friend or colleague or one of her students came to visit us. The options for calling these damsels names were countless. When her father passed away, she became more obsessive. In addition to constantly arranging so-called chance encounters, this is how she began to constantly drip on my brain. After I celebrated my 40th birthday, it was like she went crazy. It got to the point where I couldn't live with her. Basically, I was never ashamed of living with my parents. I was fine with it. I only came to this house to sleep over or have dinner. I work all the time. Even on weekends, I wanted to always get a big paycheck to constantly develop in this field. I did get more and more money every month, but still it was not enough for me. Why should I give up money if all I need to do is to spend a little more time in the office? I did not aspire to be a supervisor. Unlike a supervisor, my earnings depended only on myself, and he had a fixed salary periodically. My salary was more than his by a factor of 1.5 to 2 times. So, what's wrong with an ordinary working man? Apart from that, there were other pluses in the fact that I was an ordinary staff worker, while on the colleagues occupying managerial positions girls hung like on the hanger of the theater outerwear. There wasn't as much attention directed at me. I was fine with that. I was not at all turned on by the fact that the girls saw me as a huge wallet. I like to choose a girl myself and pursue her. I don't know how to woo. I used all the conventional ways. Of course, all these years I really tried to find my soulmate. But my longest relationships have lasted no more than 5 months. The last relationship sucked all the energy out of me. I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Her name was Kathy. She was 20 years younger than me. I thought it was kind of cool at first. She had an energy inside her that spread to those around her. For some reason, at the bar, she had her eye on me. I tried my best to ignore her. I didn't want to get involved with underage girls. But then she managed to get me talking. Kathy turned out to be a nice person to talk to, and the time flew by. That's how we talked. And in the morning, I woke up in my bed with this girl lying on my chest. Her beautiful, long, curly, red hair was lying on the pillow, and part of it covered her bare breasts. I'll be honest, she looked stunning in the morning sunlight. I was so engrossed that at times I forgot to breathe so as not to wake her up. From that day on, our so-called love began. That girl did unimaginable things to me, manipulated me any way she wanted. I fell for it. I did everything she wanted. I bought her a car after a month. Yes, not a new one, but still, jewelry, a fur coat, even though it was summer. Travel. I gave her everything. And what I got in return? What did I get in return? Sex. And that's about it. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She partied all the time. It's getting a little hard for me to live at her pace. I wouldn't mind her partying all the time, as long as she was happy. But every time she didn't get enough. I didn't understand what I needed to do to make her calm down, settle down. I even asked her, but she only put forward conditions under which she was willing to bring peace to my world. But she never kept her promises. Every time she returned home, all intoxicated and intoxicated. Sometimes I thought it wasn't just the alcohol. But personally, I did not force her for this action, and did not find anything suspicious at home. It was over in a flash. Somehow I wanted to please her, to arrange a romantic evening. So I did not, as usual, delayed at work. I went home right after the end of the day. On the way, I stopped by the store to buy a bunch of flowers. I knew she was home because just before I got there, she had called me and complained that her friends had canceled a meeting, and she didn't know what to do that evening. I got home, walked into the hallway, and immediately ran through the apartment without noticing anything around the dining room was gone. Her in the living room went to the bedroom too. Well, you guessed what I saw there. As in the most bearded anecdotes, my beautiful, young, red-haired beauty was swallowed by some young man with milk on his lips. Not absolutely. Oh yeah. For all that, they were both naked and I stayed to watch it. They didn't notice me until about 7 minutes later. That's when I turned around and went into the living room. A couple minutes later, they both ran out of the bedroom. The guy headed straight for the exit, and Kathy headed for me. Why are you looking at me like it's my fault? I mean, it's not a big deal. David, I agree that it's an unpleasant situation, but let's be honest, it's entirely your fault. What are you out of your mind? How am I so guilty that you decided to ride another man? David, well, that's a lot of heat. It's very simple. You're a grown man and you should know where your behavior is leading. You chose me, knowing I'm half your age. You get caught up in work all the time, and I have certain needs. Henceforth, so that this doesn't happen again, pay more attention to me. Kathy, do you even see what you're saying? I'm always stuck at work because your appetites are growing by the day. And please tell me, when have I ever dared to deny myself your carnal needs? Well, it's never happened. I'm sure you'd deny me. Are you trying to make me complex? It's just that sometimes I have wild urges that need to be curbed, but you're not around. So sometimes I have to look for other options. I have to look. So it wasn't the only time, and you're so calm about it. No, it wasn't. Are you not hearing me at all? Well, reevaluate your life, and then we'll be fine. To say I was shocked is like saying nothing. I've never encountered such insolence. I'll be honest, I believed for a split second that I really was at fault for what had happened. I had to pull myself together, so I slapped my cheeks a couple times, and that helped. And then I got up, went into the hallway, grabbed Kathy's bag, then headed into the kitchen. The girl was drinking tea and looking out the window. I walked over to her, picked her up in my arms. Kathy thought I had admitted guilt and had come to make up. However, that was not the case. I went to the hallway and opened the front door. Kathy began to suspect something, so she started to pull away. But my grip was ironclad. I set her barefoot on the cold tile. Paul threw the bag on the floor and closed the door. Kathy still tried to bang on the door for a while and screamed all over the floor. But as soon as I threatened her with the police, she left. The girl was not happy that all her things were left at home, but I didn't care what she was wearing. Let her be happy that I left the car to her and go to the damn grandmother. After a while, I learned from acquaintances that Kathy knew from the beginning how much money I was making. That's why he was grooming me so much at the bar during our first meeting. At that moment, everything fell into place, and I was a fool to fall for her. It was probably just passion, though. If I had really fallen for her, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her so easily. Anyway, from that moment on, I wasn't interested in relationships anymore. All 3 years, I just chose women for fun even and did not hide my income. Then things got easier. I just picked one day a week, went to a bar, and got what I wanted. If it was a busy week, I'd go to the bar 2 or 3 times. Mom saw my behavior change. She was always finding reasons for me to come to her when I met her, playing the same old songs. To be honest, I just let everything she said pass me by. After a while, I realized I couldn't let it go. Something must be done to calm my mother down. If she calmed down, my life would be at peace. I could think of nothing better to do than to find a fake bride. I had to choose a middle-aged woman because my mother would not fall for a young girl, and continued to brainwash me. There were no single adult women in my neighborhood. I decided to look in the park. There was no time to wait, and it was Saturday. It was getting close to sundown, so there were a lot of people there. Probably a lot of visitors thought I was a maniac because I glare at every woman who even remotely fit my criteria. When I realized that I was frankly sad, I put on my glasses. I didn't want to end up for such a misunderstanding. And in the monkey house, they'd put a couple of cases on me. After 40 minutes, I found a woman who matched my requirements perfectly. I could tell she was a homemaker, but she wasn't a gray mouse. She looked delicious. A lot of young girls wouldn't have been on a par with her. Next to the woman was a boy of about 15 and a girl who was no more than 4 years old. I watched this family for about 30 minutes, and that's because I couldn't see. Is there a wedding ring on the ring finger of my potential bride's right hand? I tried to look from all angles, but nothing worked. Then I decided that I would sort of accidentally bump into her, and if there was no ring, I would meet her right away. I walked towards her and pushed her with my shoulder. Apparently, I didn't calculate my strength because the lady fell on the lawn. I didn't see that coming, and I was stunned. "Where are you going?" The guy brought me out of my trance. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really didn't see you. You're all right." I rushed over to the woman to help her up. I was really afraid I'd hurt her. "Yes, thank you. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose." God, how wrong was she? My face was getting angry paint. "Charles, don't be so rude. Not all people do harm on purpose. For God's sake, forgive my nephew. He's always protecting me since my husband left me." My gaze slid down her arm. There really was no ring. That's good news. What's even better news is that, pray tell, it's only her nephew. That fact made it much easier, because young boys are very wary of a potential stepfather, albeit a fictitious one. And I understand this is your young protector. You can tell he's ready to snatch me up with just a look. "Charles, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your aunt. Or maybe you did, but on the bed. She's a very pretty mademoiselle. I'd like to rectify the situation." "How is that possible?" "Well, for starters, I can take you to the infirmary so we can all make sure you're all right." "You what?" "Take it easy. But I've been rolling around in the grass a little bit. There's Betty already rolling around in the park every day." The woman pointed to the girl who was lying on the lawn with her own grass. "Well, then maybe we can get acquainted, and I'll buy you dinner, all of you." I stand corrected. We can get acquainted. I have to know the name of the person I'm supposed to avoid, in order not to end up on the grass again, the woman said with a smile. "My name is Adriana." "You have a very beautiful name, Adriana," said I in a languid voice, extending my hand. "And I am David. Our names sound similar. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we met." "Well, I don't know. It wasn't what you'd call a pleasant encounter." She seemed more confident than I first thought. "So how about dinner?" "My treat. Everybody dance, as they say." That's when the kid's eyes lit up. Apparently, his parents and Adriana didn't spoil him with much in the way of goodies. "All right, but we'll have dinner without the kids." But the aunt pulled Charles' no aunts. "Take Betty's hand and go home. There's everything in the refrigerator so you can satisfy your hunger. The adults need to talk." 3. "What's that for?" "Let me drive them home." "Why walk? And you won't have to worry." "I'm not gonna worry about it. We live a block away from this park. The boys won't even have to cross a busy road." At that moment, Charles took her hand, showed us his tongue, and the girl repeated after him. The sight was very cute. A genuine smile stretched across my face. The guys headed towards the exit of the park. I hesitated a bit as I didn't know what to do with Adriana, whether to give her a hand or not. I mean, she had just fallen. Maybe she really needed my help. There were already a few sparks running between us, though, so the gesture could be interpreted differently. And I wouldn't want that, because the woman I was looking for was fictitious. She had a role to play. I wasn't interested in anything else. Adriana. The first one headed toward the exit, and I, not knowing what to do, put my hands behind my back. I probably looked like a prisoner, but I didn't care. The important thing was not to ruin something that wasn't even there yet. I walked the woman to my car, opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I got behind the wheel, and we drove off. At that moment, I had no idea where we were going. I had to pick a mid-range establishment, so to speak, so she wouldn't think I was courting her. On the way to another neighborhood, I saw a small restaurant and stopped outside of it. The hostess took us to a table on the veranda. The place was delightful, and so was the view. It was already sunset, and the sky was going from bright blue to deep purple, and in the middle was a streak of red. Adriana looked ravishing. For her age, I was sure she'd order some standard Kaiser. We'll talk. However, the woman surprised me. She ordered lamb kebab and yum potatoes. I don't know what was on my face, but when she looked up at me, she said, "You probably know what it's like to spend all day with kids and feet." "I'm lying around and hungry as a dog," said the woman and burst into loud laughter. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what you are experiencing. I don't know how you perceive my facial expression, but I was just surprised that a woman with such a beautiful figure eats potatoes with mutton. Oh, I was shy. "So don't be shy. Order whatever you want," I said with a smile. "No, let's stop here, or I'll change now, and then I'll want to sleep. I won't care what you talk to me about. I will demand that you take me home. What do you say? Tell me about your children. I understand Charles is your nephew. And Betty, who's Betty? Daughter? You could say that, but more specifically, if you don't mind. A daughter. A daughter who decided to have a baby as an adult. You are tactfully silent, but I can see that you want to ask me what. How old am I? You don't have to deny it. I can see it in your eyes. Of course, it's indecent for a woman to ask such a question. But I'm not the hidden type. I'm 40 years old and you're 43. Wow. How did you know that? It didn't even take you long to figure it out. I've known you for as long as I've known you. I've been intuitive since I was a child. My father trusted me to pick lottery tickets when I was very young. And guess what? We hit the jackpot. So keep in mind, I can be very useful to you. Adriana had a wide smile on her face, which mesmerized my gaze. Shall we switch to you? I suggested, for I was tired of this officiousness. Let's do it. I began to ask Adriana about her life. I needed to find the perfect woman for the role of a bride, albeit a fictitious one. My mother was a smart, wise woman. She was determined to every little detail. So everything had to be perfect, impossible to tamper with. It turned out that Adriana owned one of the drugstore chains in our town. That was a good thing. The woman had everything she needed, which meant she had no claim on my money. Adriana would have wanted to step away from her business a long time ago and turn the chain of pharmacies over to someone else, but she couldn't trust anyone. The woman said she would run the outlets as long as she could. Then she would simply sell the business. Adriana was a very pleasant person to talk to. To be honest, I didn't want to ruin the evening with my proposal. Adriana was worth more than that. And I was almost certain that my proposal would offend the woman. But it was worth a try, as they say. Adriana, I have a confession to make. I only ask one thing. You listen to me all the way through before you jump to conclusions. Sounds interesting. Well, let's give it a try. I'm listening. I took in a full chest of air. My heart began to pound harder, echoing in my ears. It was no longer acceptable to back up. Adriana, I didn't crash into you by accident, but I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. When I saw you on the lawn, I freaked out and cursed myself with all the right words in the world. I meant to hit you gently with my shoulder, but I didn't realize the force. So I'm prepared to apologize to you for the rest of my life. I'm so ashamed. Shut up, please, I said between words as I saw Adriana open her mouth to say something. I'll go on. Why did I do it? That's the question you're asking. I wanted to meet you, but I didn't see you. Is there a wedding ring on your finger? I thought I'd check it that way. Again, I'm sorry, please. After that, I got to the point. I told the woman about how my mother cares for me despite my advanced age. Of course, I was afraid to seem like a mama's boy in her eyes. However, I could not pass this part of the story about myself. Then I smoothly came to the fact that my mother's cherished dream is that I have a family. Adriana, please, there's not much left. You see, her obsession had become so unbearable that I was almost desperate, so I decided on one strange act. Introduce my mother to a fictitious bride. The woman interrupted me. I was blown away by her insight. No, you had to. I was trying to make it sound veiled. Did I just blurt it out to her? I'm not gonna ask you how you figured it out, but yes, you're right. I thought it was a fake relationship. Please note, not a marriage, but a relationship. It's the best way out of this situation. Well, you know, my mother's not gonna be fooled. She can detect deception. I didn't want some girl who'd do anything for money. I wanted an older woman. You mean old? No? Adriana, no. You can't find a smart woman these days. That's why I looked and looked, and I chose you. Jesus, you've been following me around in a frightened tone of voice, she said. Not just today. I've been watching you for half an hour. Anyway, I've decided you'd be perfect for the role. I'm willing to offer you anything. Please help me. Sounds very strange, to be honest, but I've always been very adventurous. So I guess I'll take it. But I have one condition. I agree to all say that I have not fallen in love with me, that you have not fallen in love with me. I speak Russian, yes. I ended up laughing. It's been a long time since anyone made me laugh like that. I mean, come on. Was she really so sure of herself that she would assume I was falling in love with her? She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But you don't fall in love with someone like her when you're older. They choose them for a home that's cozy and clean and smells of borscht and hockey sticks. I promise, Adriana, that I do not fall in love with you, I said with a slight smile. After that, we were clear on the goals we had to reach. It took us at least an hour and a half to come up with a plan of action. During this time, we drank 2 cups of coffee, and it got dark outside. Not a single star was visible in the sky. It was covered with clouds and a light breeze came up. But it was cold, so I took off my jacket and threw it over Adriana's shoulders. I'm a gentleman. What a nobody. There was no time to delay. So we scheduled the meeting with my mother for tomorrow. Despite the fact that Adriana was an elegant woman, I asked her to observe some dress code. No cleavage, no skirts above the knees, no loose hair. My mother considered all women who didn't adhere to these criteria very frivolous. And what man would want his fiancée to be considered as such, even if it was fictitious? After the discussion, we went home. I drove Adriana home. She actually lived in the heart of the city in a swanky new housing complex. I even managed to get a good look at her windows because Charles was standing in one of them, and 4-year-old Betty's head was sticking out of the other. They were waiting for a woman not 1 o'clock. At this point, I even felt ashamed. It was because of me. They'd spent so much time alone. I hoped they weren't hungry. If they'd come to dinner with us then, I probably wouldn't have told Adriana everything. And the kids don't need to hear that. Adriana left, and I headed home. That night must have been endless. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get the thought out of my head that our plan was going to fail. And then I remembered the woman's words when she asked me not to fall in love with her. A smile spread across my face. It felt so warm. But I didn't understand why this was happening, and shook my head sharply, as if to empty it. I must have fallen asleep in the morning. So when the alarm clock rang, I didn't even realize where I was. Like a robot, I got up, washed my face, and went to work. I stopped at a coffee shop on the way and got a double espresso. I needed a dose of pep. I took 3 sips. I was going to repeat the purchase, but I thought the effect would come a little later. And I was right. For the first hour at work, I just sat there staring at the wall. How could I write program code if I forgot even my name from excitement? Not to mention the name of my so-called fiancé. When the vigor began to appear in me, I immediately got to work. The cat was pissing himself. My fingers couldn't keep up with my thoughts. I was sure that at the end of the working day I would discover mistakes. But I was wrong. The program worked the first time. It helped to cheer me up even more. I urgently needed to come to my senses because the meeting with my mother was getting closer. Right after the end of the workday, I went home, showered, shaved, and styled my hair. Everything has to be a high level. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't believe the scam. After I realized I looked amazing, I went to pick up Adriana. As I drove up, I noticed she was already waiting for me at the entrance. She looked amazing. She was wearing a classic black background dress that developed easily in the wind, a 3/4 arm on her feet, classic boat shoes, and in her hands a wisp of delicate purple that matched her belt perfectly. This woman certainly had taste. As Adriana got into the car, I could smell the scent of her perfume. It was different from the one she had been wearing yesterday. The day before, she smelled of the sea and freshness. Today, it was a pleasant floral scent with a slight sweetness. "Hi," I held out my hand, hoping she would put her graceful hand in it. "You look stunning." "Hello, David. Really, all your wishes are taken care of?" she asked. A slight smile appeared on her face. I was staring so hard that I didn't even realize we were already holding hands. "You're more than ready. Let's go." Adriana bowed and waved as if the coachman was sitting in front of us. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pressed the gas pedal, and drove toward my mother's house. Adriana and I had a pleasant conversation on the way. She was talking about how Charles and Betty had greeted her warmly yesterday. The boys had missed their aunt and mom so much that they had decided to make her dinner. True, it was very different. They served her a salad of red fish apples, crab sticks, and mayonnaise. Adriana recounted that she tried her best to pretend that it was the most exquisite dish she had ever tasted in her life. She prayed to God that the kids would get away from her as soon as possible so she could stop eating that salad. She told it so emotionally that I couldn't keep from laughing. Tears came to my eyes, which made me unable to see the road well. The woman made me laugh so hard that I had to park in the first place I could find. When we pulled up to my mother's house, my heart sank. I knew it was all fictitious, but I was worried as if Adriana was really my fiancée. The woman gently took my hand and told me not to worry. She promised that everything would go off to the best of her ability. I believed her because she was a wise and responsible woman. I think that if she could not fulfill my request, she would have given up on the scam right away. She was not the kind of person who could and liked to lose. More accurately, no one likes to lose. However, some people aren't even upset by it. They take it for granted. We got out of the car, and from that moment on we looked like a couple in love. After all, my mother could stand at the window and watch us. Adriana took me under her arm, and like a gallant cavalier I led her to the entrance, opened the door, and held her close. When we took the elevator to the floor we needed, we found that the door to the apartment was already open, and half of my mother's face was peering out of it. She was too curious. "But couldn't you just wait in the apartment? That's where we're going anyway." "Hello, my son, my good son. God, I couldn't believe it. That you would come to me today, and not alone at the expense of Metal Mother." "Hello, Mom. What did you think I was doing, lying to you?" "Meet my girlfriend, Adriana." Adriana walked up to her mother and extended her hand. Mom responded to her welcoming gesture. "Adriana, I'm so glad my dummy has you. But don't get too excited. It's just that we haven't met at all yet. It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. Of course, of course. Let's get acquainted. Why are you standing in the hallway? Come into the hall. David, help your bride." "Mom, we're going out." "Well, it's not hard for a girl to grow up to be a bride. I'm sure you won't drag this out too long. I'm not young at all." and I'd like to babysit grandchildren very much. Adriana's mom turned around and gave me her beautiful smile. It was obvious that the woman was feeling a little awkward. I can't imagine how much the discomfort level would have increased if we were actually dating. Mom was pushing us when we were still in the hallway. What would happen when we made our way into the living room? I had no idea at the time. A sumptuous table was set in the hall. The food was as good as a restaurant's in appearance. Even for a second, I thought that my mom had hired a chef to prepare all these delicious dishes. Of course, that wasn't actually true. My mom had a lifelong love of cooking, and she did it deliciously. Her dishes were not only delicious, but beautiful as well. Over the years, she had honed her skills. We sat down at the table, so there was no doubt in my mother's mind that we were dating. We sat very close to each other, so our hands and feet were touching. At this point, I noticed that my body was responding to this kind of contact. I had to remember the not-so-great moments of my life, so as not to embarrass myself. But I thought Adriana had noticed something, because she looked at me with a sly look and a smile that said, "Yeah, so maybe we'll have a real relationship, I can see that." It made me very uncomfortable. "Adriana, well, tell me what you do in life." The woman happily began to tell me about herself. I started to worry that she wouldn't say too much, because she was very enthusiastic. My mom listened with interest. I could see from her face that she was pleased that Adriana had her own chain of pharmacies. She even joked that she now knew where to go with the list of medicines that the doctor would make at the appointment, because the treatment was very expensive. At first, I wanted to ask her why she was going to be treated, but then I bit my tongue, because at her age all the sores come out. "Adriana, how old are you?" "Mom, isn't it unseemly for you to be so hard on her? But I have to know if your woman can give birth to you or not. I can see she's not a girl anymore." After saying that, I was speechless. That's when my mother became so tactless. How could she even say such a thing? Looking at her face, I realized that she didn't regret the question she asked. The silence was awkward and dragged on. Adriana realized she had to do something. "Honey, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm 40 years old," she said with a soft smile. 40, her mother said thoughtfully. "That's menopause. It is not a fact that you will be able to get pregnant." "Mom, come on, Mom, who's going to take care of you if not me? Maybe she'll leave you when she realizes she can't give birth to you." "Mom, God, honey, calm down. You know that in today's world, medicine doesn't stand still. If you can't get pregnant naturally, you can use IVF. It's such a small thing." I marveled at how my fictitious fiancée kept her composure, and the insults flying at her weren't fictitious at all. What normal person wouldn't take offense at something my mother said, no matter who that person was? He would feel insulted. But IVF is nice, but it doesn't feel real. "Don't worry, I've got kids. They can help relieve your loneliness if you need it." God, why did she have to say that? This is a real failure, I thought, and I was right. I can see why you're not so worried about getting pregnant. It's just that you already have kids and don't need any more. "Mom, please, let's just drop the subject." We did close the subject. I realized that I had a conversation with my mother ahead of me. I was sure she'd be crazy about Adriana. But from the very doorstep, she wasn't satisfied with her age. The interesting thing is that she wouldn't be satisfied with the age of the bride. In any case, she would arise that she was too young and would leave me, and the other one was old and would not bear me children with my mother. There was no golden mean. The rest of the time we talked about distracted topics. Mom was already unwilling to continue the event, and Adriana masterfully built herself a fool who supposedly does not understand anything. That's commendable. After all, one should treat one's mother-in-law with leniency, even if it is a fictitious one. I'm sure that this behavior of my companion, Mom, was even angrier. She liked it when people reacted painfully to her words. Mom thought she was always telling the truth. I thought she was just being rude. I didn't have the energy to continue the evening. So Adriana and I cited fatigue and left Mother's house. At the threshold, my mother reached out to kiss me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "See your lady off and come back to me to talk." Shit, that's what I was most afraid of. But I didn't let on. Adriana took my hand, and we headed for the elevator. We didn't say anything until we were out of the elevator and in the car. And Adriana, please forgive her. I'm just shocked. I had no idea she'd act like this. She's always been like this, but not on the day she met her future daughter-in-law. How could she even say that? You're at a normal age. Do you hear me, normal? I started yelling as I drove to her house. David, stop it. She's right here. As a mother, I wouldn't be happy with your choices either. You're a young man. You need children. And a woman like me would not be able to give birth to you, or I'd be afraid to. At that age, there can be complications not only for the baby, but for the mother as well. Stop talking nonsense. I was losing my temper. By then I was pulling into Adriana's driveway. I said, "You're a normal age. I don't think it's as bad as my mother says," I blurted out as I pulled the car over. Prove that you don't think so." With a charming smile, said Adriana. I was confused. I didn't understand what she was expecting from me. My body reacted strangely to her words with some unknown impulse. I threw myself on top of her and kissed her. Her lips were very soft, and I felt an electric shock run through my body. It was a long-forgotten feeling. For several years, no woman had stirred in me such desire as she did today. My hands disobeyed my brain and continued to explore her body. It was beautiful, despite her age. Adriana, on the other hand, also had a genuine desire. It was evident in her demeanor. Her breasts rose higher and higher as her breathing became heavier and heavier. I was somewhat surprised at this turn of events, as I thought that my fictitious bride was responsible for the task I had set for her, namely creating the illusion of an ideal couple, nothing more. But I could tell from her that she had wanted me for a long time, and that fact was a pretty big boost to my self-esteem back then. And not just hers. I don't even remember how we ended up in Adriana's apartment, because I don't think we stopped kissing at all. Her lips were so soft, so passionate. I was starting to taste blood after a lot of kissing. Apparently, Adriana hadn't practiced such long kisses in a long time. Opening the front door, we piled into the apartment. After that, it was like we were blown away. I started tearing off her clothes like a beast and completely stopped thinking about the fact that there might be children in the house. Adriana, as if she sensed that I had that question inside of me. "It's okay, they're gone," the woman said with a huff. "They are at their grandmother's house, don't worry." After that, I realized that I was allowed to do everything that I had previously been afraid to even imagine. The rest of the time, we did not get out of bed. I'll leave out all the details, but I will only say that in the morning I felt as if I had been run over by a roller. All my muscles and joints ached, as if I had not made love. Yesterday I worked out and left world records in weightlifting. When I woke up, Adriana was still in bed and singing sweetly. At some point I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. At that moment she seemed to me the most beautiful creature on this planet. I couldn't understand what this woman had done to me. After all, until a few days ago, I was not interested in anything but my work. Adriana was good too. It turns out she had deceived me. I mean, we agreed beforehand that our relationship would be a sham, and today I'm in bed with her after a hot night I'll probably never forget. I wonder how Adriana will feel when she wakes up. Maybe she'll be ashamed, or maybe she'll want a sequel. Maybe after this, she'll think I'll marry her. What if I do marry her? I don't reject that possibility at all. I had once thought that this woman would only help me to put my mother's guard down. I didn't think she'd make me go crazy. When Adriana opened her eyes, I pretended like a boy to be asleep. My eyes were slightly open, so I saw everything through my lashes. She lost her eyes with her beautiful hands. After that, she looked at me as if I was the love of her life. Maybe that's how it really was. I guess I'd like to believe it. but I was convinced otherwise. Adriana had a recent love anyway, as evidenced by the presence of her little girl, Betty. The woman had a look on my face. A slight, gentle smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, she got up and left the room. At this point, I rolled over onto my back, put my hands behind my head, opened my eyes, and stared up at the ceiling. At first, I just didn't know how to act. It was because I couldn't decide what I felt for this beautiful woman. Fragments of last night's flawless and passionate night began to appear in my mind. For a moment, I fell out of reality and only came back when Adriana appeared in front of my face with a tray in her hands. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted through the room. "Good morning, honey," the woman said casually. The way she addressed me made me speechless. I could only reward her with a slight smile. I hoped that at that moment she thought that I didn't answer her only because I had just woken up. "David, calm down. I can see in your eyes that you're really stressed out about last night. Relax. We're adults. We did what we wanted to do. This whole fake marriage thing really got on your nerves. Your mother didn't give us a hard time last night. If you thought I didn't realize it, I'm offended that you think I'm so stupid. Come on, wake up. The coffee will get cold, and it won't be so refreshing. I know something else that'll perk you up in the morning." I didn't expect myself to say it. I'm embarrassed to ask what it is. "Did I ask you to put the breakfast tray on my nightstand?" There was a look of bewilderment on her face. It amused me even more when her hands were free. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her down onto the bed. The woman was pleasantly surprised. She was smiling and laughing. I continued to do what I hadn't had time to finish during the night. Yes, the night was very short indeed. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed for 3 days. Maybe she's expressing something in another way. There's no way I can explain the irresistible attraction. My lips explored every inch of her body. I wanted her to feel how hot they were. Her body responded to every kiss I gave her. Goosebumps covered her skin. Her legs, her arms trembled slightly. I don't think I'd ever turned on a woman this hard before yesterday. Yes, it was beautiful. That's how our morning went. Of course, by the time we were done making love, the coffee was already icy, figuratively speaking. To be honest, I didn't care for it at all. I began to catch myself thinking that I felt more than comfortable in the company of this beautiful woman. It was obvious that she had absolutely no regrets. I wondered if she had any feelings for me. Why does she always act like nothing happened? Or is that how it's supposed to be? It's not how it's supposed to be. And there were thoughts going through my head all the time. Sometimes I felt like I was mumbling to myself. Maybe I was. Because after a few minutes of silence, Adriana said, "I told you not to fall in love with me." After saying that, I'm seething. Indeed, she did say that. How could she have known it would end up like this? Why are you looking at me like that? David, when you pushed me in the park, I could see from your face that you liked me. I didn't take your request seriously at first. I thought you were just looking for an excuse to meet me. But after just an hour, I realized you weren't lying. You really wanted to give your mother a show like this. I'm sure it didn't look the same in your head. And you may be surprised now, but in my head, it ended up exactly the way it did. Do you really want to talk about the fact that it was written all over my face that in just a few days you and I would be lying in the same bed together? No, not that literally. I could tell by the look on your face that you didn't mind waking up in bed with me. God, why do you look so scared? Do I look like a witch to you? Relax, I'm not a witch, just very perceptive women. At that moment, I was really in shock. My state of mind was not due to being shrewd, but because she was indeed right. After all, it was then that I chose Adriana from the crowd, not because she looked like a hostess, but because she was unrealistically attractive against the rest. Agree that when you choose your bride, even an efficient one, you would still want her to be beautiful and attractive. That's why I made a mistake. Instead of Adriana, I should have stopped my eyes on some gray, unremarkable mouse. And to make Mom happy, This mouse had to be younger than me, but not by much. Although I don't know what would have to happen for my mom to be happy with my choice. She would probably be pleased only in one case, if she herself had chosen a bride for me from all her students, daughters, friends, nurses, from the district polyclinic. Well, to hell with it, whatever happens. After all, I'm not going to marry her. It's not like I'm a teenager who loses his head to the first woman who gives him a mind-blowing night. But also the morning, of course. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself with something she didn't see there. Walking over to Adriana, I slapped her. I couldn't resist. She's got a delicious figure, I'll give her that. What are we going to do? Shy like a boy. I asked the woman who was stirring my emotions. With what? David, just because we slept together. Even if more than once does not mean that between us urgently need to tie the relationship. It's not going to happen against our will. Are you against it? Aya, honey, you are the one who hired me for a fake relationship, not me. With a gentle smile, Adriana said. There was some confusion on my face. I couldn't find the words to say because I didn't know what expressions of feelings would be appropriate in this situation. Why are you looking at me so guiltily? David, we are well into our 20s. Moreover, well into our 35th decade. You realize how much that phrase terrifies me. But nevertheless, we have the right to do whatever we want and sleep with whomever we want. So what's wrong with that? How can you even say that? It was fantastic. You're an excellent lover and, frankly, a good woman. Unexpectedly, I blurted it out to Adriana. It's all out in the open. At that moment, I felt like a boy in front of an experienced adult woman because her face didn't show an ounce of confusion. She knew she was good. I was turned on and annoyed at the same time by her self-confidence. Adriana, I'm going to confess to you, even though I don't know what to confess. I really don't know how I feel about you. I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. I just don't know what it is. But then, so be it. She said with a smile. What life will lead to, that we will be happy. But I'll keep my promise anyway. Your mother will be fooled. Even if we don't have a real relationship, it's already a matter of principle for me. She's so old. And your son didn't think so at all this night, Adriana said. I rolled in laughter. I realized that if it was not love, it was obvious adoration. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I never thought that in my old age I would sincerely give flowers and gifts to someone. Adriana and I met 2 or 3 times a week. I didn't want it to be just sex. I knew I wanted something more. I took her out on dates to the best restaurants in town, to last-minute movies, to the theater. I wanted our relationship to be romantic. I knew that sooner or later the candy bouquet period would end, so I wanted it to bring as many positive experiences as possible. Everything was pretty good, but just one thought kept me on my toes. I didn't understand how Adriana felt about me. She was acting dignified, and I would even say reserved. She had never been known for her warmth. In words, in behavior, only when we were in the bedroom. She was ready for me like an affectionate cat. Nightly flings allowed me to let all my emotions out: love, passion, jealousy, anger, and resentment at her coldness. Yes, I did fall in love with her. It took me about 3 weeks to realize it. The realization came the day I woke up in the morning in my apartment, turned on my other side, hoping to hug Adriana. But the other half of the bed was empty. I hoped she had woken up earlier and was now in the kitchen making coffee. I couldn't smell the coffee aroma, however. After going through all the rooms, I realized she wasn't in the apartment. I picked up my phone and found a message on it. Sorry, urgent business. She left. Didn't even have a family yet. I'll see you next week. In that moment, somewhere in my chest, it felt like I had a red-hot spear stabbed into my heart. Why was her message so aloof? Why was she so distant from me? Do I not arouse in her an ounce of tender feeling? I was ready to tear the whole place apart. I realized that I wanted her around me all the time. Not a couple days a week, but 24/7. Why has no other woman in my life ever evoked such feelings in me? Why does she accept my advances? She sleeps with me, but she's not affectionate. I had 1,000 questions, but I guess I was never going to get answers. All this time, we no longer went to visit my mother. In fact, I could have brought any girl to her in whom she would have immediately found 1,000 flaws. After that conversation, my mother told me that she no longer wanted us at her place, and she also disapproved of my choice. Even if we get married, my mother will not come to the celebration, so as not to once again be upset about how old my spouse is. Can you imagine this from my mother, who has been hoping for years for some woman to take me in? And here she was with one of the best options, and still she's not happy. Women, they're nothing but trouble. That's true. Until I had Adriana in my life, the only trouble was with my mother. But now there's two of them, and I lost all sense of ground. I just stopped having confidence in the future. I decided that I would no longer call or write Adriana myself. I'll admit it was unrealistic hard. I wanted to ask the neighbors to tie my hands behind my back, but then I decided it wouldn't help. If I wanted to, I would have typed a message to her, but I held on with all my might to get her out of my head for a moment. I started to drink a little too much alcohol just to relax and stop catching the train of thought that was keeping me from resting. 3 days later, a text came to my phone late at night. I was already asleep, but decided to read it as usually no one texted me this late. It was a message from her long me to stand under the door, and I jumped up like scalded. I didn't immediately realize she was standing outside my apartment. I was trying to get my room in order, grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it into my closet. I'm sure she heard all of that. I could directly feel her standing outside the door, smiling. 5 minutes later, at least I didn't think it had been more than that, and I flew up to the front doors, barred by my hair sticking out. Opening the door, I saw Adriana. She was marvelously beautiful. In her hands, she held a bottle of semi-sweet red wine. "Did you clean up?" Adriana asked, smiling. I didn't. I was just sleeping. I didn't immediately realize you were standing outside my apartment. I started making excuses like a kid. Yeah, who was running around your apartment at breakneck speed and banging on the closet doors? Adriana, why would it make you feel better if I told you I did a little scatterbrain? Of course it would make me feel better, but your little bit, that's a lie. A little is no more than 5 minutes. I've been standing here for 20. You have. Oh God, I'm sorry. But why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. If you had invited me in sooner, we wouldn't have had to work things out in the common hallway, Adriana said. I sensed she was annoyed. I wanted to beg her forgiveness, but I didn't. I still had some pride left in me. Why should I apologize? If we'd made an appointment beforehand, everything would have been top-notch. She knew that, but now she just showed up unannounced, and I was beginning to wonder why. Maybe you were here with your mistress. Is that it? She was getting jealous. Confidence started to spread. Confidence began to spread throughout her body. Or maybe you were a beer drinker or something. I asked the woman. A smug smile began to appear on my face. I'm jealous. Who do you take me for? What am I? 15 years old? I was just asking. I just wanted to tell you that if you're ever with a girl and I show up uninvited, just don't open the door. Text me. I'll understand. You're entitled to have fun whenever and with whomever you want. She was clearly unhappy that I caught her being jealous, but I understood. Finally, after all this time, she was mine. I wanted to keep playing this game, but I was afraid I'd overdo it. She'd get angry and leave. That's not what I wanted. I demanded her constant presence around me. Walking over to her, I gently brushed a strand of hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. My hand slowly descended from her head, Natalia. All the while she looked at me without running. At one point, it seemed to me that what stood in front of me was not a grown woman, but a girl of about 18. She desired me. I could tell. Her shyness repulsed me a little. After all, I had never noticed this quality in the moments of our encounters. I couldn't hold back long and kissed her. God, how long had I waited for this? The few days we hadn't seen each other seemed like an eternity. Her coldness made me think that she didn't care about me. But now I realize I was wrong. She tried to deceive me, but her body says otherwise. I'll leave out what happened next. I'll just say it was wonderful. It was like having our first time again. Adriana, why are you trying to pretend? I asked her as she lay on my chest. I mean, what am I faking? You imagined it. It was clear from her voice that she was agitated and trying hard to hide her emotions. Adriana, our entire relationship, I thought I was indifferent to you, and you were with me only because you were interested in participating in the scam I offered you when you disappeared in the morning and disappeared for a few days. I gave myself my word that I wouldn't write you a single message. Do you have any idea how hard that was for me? I started drinking before bed, but there was a fine line. If I drank a little more, I'd be on your doorstep in half an hour. If I drank less, I couldn't sleep because you fogged my judgment, and I couldn't think of anything but you. And what makes you think I'm pretending? Raising her tone slightly, Adriana asked. Now she no longer looked like a self-sufficient adult who knew the value of her time and feelings. Everything remained as it was. Adriana, why are you deceiving me? You're acting differently now. In my eyes, you're like a young girl who's overcome with jealousy. Just because you think you are, doesn't mean you are. Maybe you're the one who sees me that way. But in the eyes of others, I haven't changed. Adriana, tell me. She lay on my chest again and was silent for about 5 minutes. And then she sucked in a breath. What did she scream? What do you want to hear? That I love you? Yes, I do. Why was I acting like that? Because I didn't want to admit it to myself. I'm 40 years old. What love? Even before we met, I believed in love. My last boyfriend looked quite solid and respectable, but in reality, he turned out to be a common Alfonso. Oh God, yes. If he'd only been an Alfonso, I wouldn't have cared so much. He humiliated me, and he stole from me. Do you have any idea how I feel? I'm scared, David. I don't want what we have to turn into something more. You know, people move in and out all the time. Breakups are inevitable. Even though you know you have no future with that person, it still hurts so much when he leaves you. What makes you think that if we get back together, we'll break up? You're setting yourself up for negativity. In this case, of course, nothing good can come of it. You'll always look for faults in me. Like now, you came here for a reason. You're used to me writing you almost every day. And now I've disappeared. You didn't come here mostly because you missed me, but because you were sure I had someone. No, that's not true. Adriana looked at me with eyes of her own. She knew she was lying, and it was very obvious. Okay, you win. Yes, I'm jealous, yes. It was crazy to me when you stopped texting me. I thought you were just trying to get rid of me in my long life. I've been dumped by men a few times without saying anything. That's what annoys me the most. If you've fallen out of love, say so. If you have someone else, say so. And you look for the easiest ways, not thinking that you will bring a lot of pain to the person who loves you more than anything else in the world. Adriana, calm down. You're acting like you just ran into my apartment and found some girl in my bed, sitting on top of me. She came on top of me. I was asleep. Then I woke up and started cleaning up fast. Scattered all over the couch. What's your beef with me? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you just accept a situation where we love each other? Even if you're sure it's not forever, it might be a good idea to live in the present, not the past, not the future. If you're happy here and now with me, why should you care about what will happen in a month or a year? At that moment, I turned my eyes to Adriana and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. More than anything, I disliked women who cried. It had to do with the fact that I just didn't know how to act. I hugged her, kissed the top of her head, but I couldn't find the right words. You can't say the right thing when you don't know the reason for the tears. We sat on the bed for about 10 minutes, her crying on my chest and me stroking her hair. After that, I found the strength to tell her how I felt about her. The woman began to calm down. Her sobs became quieter and quieter. The tears were no longer flowing so heavily. Yes, we had such a difficult conversation a month after we met. It's very difficult when two adults with broken hearts meet and realize they have some magical feelings for each other. It's always a scary moment. I understood him like no one else because I felt the same way. I've been through betrayal and lies, but I don't want to think about it now. At that time, what I wanted most of all was to live today, to feel it as much as possible, not caring about what awaits us in a year or two. I realized that Adriana wanted the same thing, but had a lot of fear. Despite this, we started dating her. To be honest, I wanted us to move in together. However, Adriana was against it. I did not put pressure on her as I realized that she needed time to make sure that I would not bring her harm and pain. Despite this, we went on dates every day. It was a magical time for me. I enjoyed every second I spent with her by my side. Adriana really stopped being the willful person she seemed at first. She was turning into a young girl in love. I liked that so much. It seemed to me that this woman was a combination of contradictory qualities. I didn't know what to expect from her in any given situation. Sometimes she would reprimand me like a strict teacher, and sometimes she would make me steal lilacs from the flower beds. Sometimes she wanted to watch some art house movie, and sometimes she wanted me to run barefoot across the lawn. It was really quite entertaining. She'd never acted like that before. In fact, back then, she was still struggling with the warm feeling she had for me. Every date we went on ended in bed. She and I were on the move. We'd go to my apartment or hers. What struck me most was the fact that when we ended up at her apartment, there were never any children there. Adriana said that her nephew was taken by her sister, and she sent her daughter to her mother. I was interested in listening to all her conversations because I knew nothing about her family. For some reason, she kept avoiding the subject. At first, it made me tense, but then I just decided that there were more interesting conversations in the world. But when the topic was about her family, Adriana would always turn the conversation, and Elena would throw kisses at me. At the time, I was fine with that. Sometimes she stayed overnight. And this time, I especially loved, because she always got up before me to make breakfast, and it didn't matter if it was a weekend or a weekday. Most often on such days, I woke up to the ineffable aroma of freshly roasted coffee or her signature airplane. After we ate breakfast, I would get ready for work, tossing in home repairs along the way. Out of habit, I still peered through her windows the same way I did the first time. To be honest, I really wanted to see the kids there. It was a very sweet picture. When I was young, I often dreamed of having a son and a daughter. But things turned out differently. Perhaps my child is out there somewhere, but his mother has chosen to keep quiet about it. If that is the case, I do not judge this woman, because she probably does not know whose child it is. As it happens, the girls I chose were not characterized by any dignity or discretion. I spent the entire workday in torture. At some point, I was ready to take a vacation at my own expense to spend as much time as possible with my beloved. True, I was on my way to my boss to write a request, but halfway there I remembered that Adriana is not unemployed, nor can she carelessly take a vacation because she has the responsibility of her chain of pharmacies on her shoulders. I never thought that my lover would be a woman who has created such a cool business in our city. Most of all, I was surprised by the fact that she had a masterful understanding of all the drugs. She could explain what to take to get rid of any symptom, but she had no environmental or medical background. I think people like that are gifted. I asked her how she was able to gain so much useful knowledge in her business. The answer was simple. I'm just very inquisitive. Gosh, I am also very inquisitive. However, all my knowledge boils down to my profession only. I have never understood how people can simultaneously study in different faculties, have good grades, and yet not pay bribes. Apparently, Adriana was one of them. Most often after work, she and I would meet and go to some restaurant or cafe to have dinner. But what I loved the most were those moments when she invited me to her house and cooked food with her own hands. Would you know how great of a cook she is? I'm sure her dishes could be on par with some famous chefs, and everything seemed to be going well with us. But there was only one thing that bothered me the most. Somehow, since the day I met her, I'd never seen her daughter or her nephew again. It seemed to me as if she were hiding them from me. I tried to speculate as to why this might be so. However, I could not find a single adequate explanation for her behavior. I had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, I was always interested in how the children were doing, what hobbies they had, what successes they had in their studies. Adriana always responded to my questions in a curt manner and changed the subject. And when I returned to talk about the children, she began to get nervous, although she tried to hide it in every possible way. I began to reassure myself that sooner or later we would start spending time together with the children, because I was sure that we are waiting for a long and happy life together. At some point, we decided to spend a weekend together. I suggested to Adriana that we try living together. She was a little scared when she heard my proposal, but I woke up in time and realized I had said the wrong thing. At that point, all I meant was to spend Saturday and Sunday 24/7 together. It was important to me. That's when I thought I could spend as much time as possible with her daughter. And if I was lucky, my nephew would also come to visit his aunt. Adriana agreed, and I chose the place myself. I didn't want it to be one of our apartments. I wanted this weekend to be something special. I chose an incredibly beautiful chalet by the river. The location was really very picturesque. The landscape designer of the vacation base had tried hard. The owners of the site kept and bred their peacock swans. In a separate paddock were horses, which you could pet. Unless, of course, you were afraid they would bite you. For some unknown reason, Adriana said that she would get to her destination on her own. This surprised me a little. However, I did not resist, as she had every right to do as she saw fit. I arrived at the recreation center a little early to ignite the brazier, prepare the meat and shampoo. My companion turned out to be very punctual, was not late for a single minute. The territory was full of vegetation. Therefore, when in the gap I saw the silhouette of Adriana, I stood with bated breath and waited for the children to appear. However, there were none. "Honey, are you so punctual?" "Hello. You know, I expected to see you in slightly different company. Actually, I was expecting to see you in company at all. Where did you put Charles and Betty? Somehow I was sure they'd be with you." "Hello, my good man. To be honest, I thought the children were coming with me too. However, Charles is being picked up by his mom, and Betty threw a tantrum. She said she wanted to go to Grandma's. I didn't try to talk her out of it, because she wouldn't have let us spend the weekend in peace. Of course, I was a little upset. However, now you and I can do whatever we want for 2 days, if you know what I mean." Adriana said the last phrase with a smile that made my heart beat faster. "Of course, I would like to spend these 2 days in bed with you. However, if we have a marathon like this, the first day of work will seem like hard labor. I'm sure that after such fitness, there won't be a single muscle left in the body that wouldn't whimper with pain and the slightest strain." At this point, Adriana burst into laughter. I had been allowing myself more and more of these kinds of jokes lately because they amused my woman. To be honest, I also liked them because I could say what I was thinking, immediately translating it into humor. The first day has passed. Ours was simply delightful. The sun was shining, there was a light breeze. We bathed in the river, sunbathed, ate delicious kebab, fresh vegetables. But the way we spent the night, I think, do not need to explain. In the morning, we woke up not from the fact that the pleasant sun rays hit us in the windows, but from the fact that a crazy downpour was drumming on the roof. Outside the window, thunder and lightning was shining. We hoped that such a mind-blowing spectacle would end soon. However, 2 o'clock later, everything was still as it was. We decided that we should leave back to the city, as the access to the recreation center was not paved with asphalt. The road was unpaved, which meant that with each passing hour the chances that we would not be able to leave increased. After quickly packing everything up, we jumped in my car and drove into town. There it was decided that we would stop at Adriana's house. However, just as we started pulling up to her driveway, her phone rang, and after a short conversation, she said that she needed to leave for work for a few hours. I was upset, but I decided that during her absence, I would have time to make dinner and clean up. I drove my lover to her place of work, and I went to her apartment. When I crossed the threshold of her house, I immediately realized that the children were not here. For a long time, the apartment had been cleaned. Everything sparkled with cleanliness. Such houses, as a rule, children do not live here. The first thing I did was to take a shower. I was there no more than 20 minutes. When I got out, I noticed someone was in the apartment. I carefully made my way across the room to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open behind the door. I couldn't see who was in there. However, I determined from the lower body that it was a woman. I didn't understand. "Uncle, who are you?" roughly inquired the guest. "You know, madam, I have the same question for you. Who are you? What are you doing here?" "Uncle, hello. This is my house. I don't remember bringing a handsome man like you here. But first of all, my name is David. Secondly, as I recall, this is Adriana's house. Of course you look a little like her, but you're not Anna. Of course I'm not Adriana. That woman whose name you mentioned, a lot of people call her my mother, but I wouldn't want her to think of herself as such." Gradually, the woman's tone began to loosen with each second. Her speech became more literate and sweet. She no longer seemed like the rude woman who stuck out from behind a refrigerator and tried to figure out who I was. She was a slender brunette with gorgeous clean hair. I wouldn't say her figure was slender. However, she was very appetizing. I caught myself thinking that I found this woman quite attractive. The fact that she called her mother threw me off. As far as I knew, my lover had only one daughter who had recently turned 4. The woman standing in front of me was at least 20. I could not believe that Adriana had kept from me the fact that she had another daughter. "So I didn't realize who you were. And when will my relative come home?" in a stern voice, the stranger asked. "Adriana and I are dating. She's been called into work for a few hours. I think she should be back by 3. Would you mind telling me your name so I'll at least know how to address you?" "Oh yeah, that's not very nice of me. My name is Kathy." "It's very nice to meet you, Kathy. I'm sorry to ask you this, but I'm really curious. Are you really Adriana's daughter?" "David, I see my mother has told me absolutely nothing about me." "Yes, that's so like her. For some reason, she always preferred to conceal my existence to her new acquaintances. Have you ever noticed that Adriana is a rather strange woman? You know, at one time I had a wild desire to show her to some psychiatrist or psychotherapist to assess her real adequacy. In part, I was a little relieved. I could finally get to know my favorite woman's family at least a little bit. Kathy seemed like a very pleasant, special person, despite the harsh language in her vocabulary. When I looked closer, I realized she looked a lot like her mother, practically a copy of her. The only thing missing was the loneliness on some parts of her body. Looking at her, I realized that Adriana had no shortage of admirers when she was young. "What are you doing here?" There was a shout. I turned around and saw my woman. Adriana's eyes were huge with surprise. One could guess that she didn't expect to see her daughter at home at all. "Mommy, hello. It's been a long time. How have I missed you?" Kathy clearly lacked acting talent, as her sarcastic grin made it clear that she was lying. "Stop putting on a show in my house. Why did you come here? Finish your business and get the hell out." "Adriana, why would you do that? I didn't realize you had a grown daughter who looks just like you. It's so beautiful. Let's all have tea together. If you want, I'll go and get Betty and everyone will be together." "David, have you met my daughter yet?" Kathy said with surprise. "Shut your mouth. Shut your fucking mouth. How dare you open it? Who the hell are you? Pack up and get out of here," shouted Adriana. Her scream was so exhausting that it made me feel scared for everyone around me. I thanked God that we didn't have the children with us right now. They wouldn't have been able to bear all that was going on right now. I tried to stay calm. However, one question did not want to leave my mind. What is this? Betty, Kathy's daughter. But then why was Adriana talking about it being her daughter? What the hell is going on here? I can't stand the sound of women screaming since I was young. I'm constantly at a loss, not knowing what to say. While Adriana was screaming at Kathy, I started sobbing. I didn't know who to comfort. I tried to insert my own nonsense, but Adriana just kept screaming. I tried to raise my voice so she could hear me, but all my efforts were in vain. This went on for about 10 minutes until Kathy left the apartment. She was in such a hurry that she didn't bother to educate herself. She picked up her sneakers and ran out. Adriana yelled after her, saying she didn't understand why God had given her such a disgusting daughter. For what sins? At first I rushed towards my beloved, but she pushed me away, shouting. Her claims were unfounded. Adriana claimed I let Kathy into the apartment, but that wasn't true. The girl must have had keys because she was inside. While I was showering, Adriana was angry, not ready to dialogue, and my mind was still reeling with thoughts that Betty was not her daughter. To get some answers, I rushed after Kathy. I realized I probably wouldn't find her because it had been so long. She could have gone anywhere. But I decided to try and catch up with her. Running out of the entrance, I stopped. I had to decide which way Kathy ran. I wasn't the lucky type, so I had no hope at all of catching up with her. If you ran to the right, you could get onto a busy road with public transportation. If you go left, you can go into a quiet, cozy park. Just then, it seemed to me that a park or a public garden would be the perfect place to calm Kathy down, as the girl looked very saddened. It was unlikely that in such a state she would head anywhere on public transportation. The choice was made. I ran to the square. In 5 minutes I was there. There were not many people, as the weather was not very good. It was raining from time to time, but in the distance I could see several female silhouettes sitting on benches. I decided that one of them must definitely be Kathy. So as not to startle anyone, I began to walk down the alley at a measured pace. I was right. Near the beginning of the park, Kathy was sitting on a bench, crying quietly. I stopped a few meters away from her because I was trying to find the right words in my head to help her calm down. But the problem was that I didn't realize what words would have that effect. After all, I didn't know what was going on between her and her mother. And if Adriana didn't say anything about what was going on, then Kathy had to tell me everything. If I decided that I was going to be part of this family, then they should have no secrets from me. Kathy, God, how long have I been looking for you? To be honest, I didn't think I could catch up with you. I inhaled. At that moment, Kathy raised her head. I saw her crying. Puffy face. Tush smeared across her cheeks. I could see in her eyes that she was surprised to see me here. David, what are you doing here? Were you looking for me on purpose? Why would you want to do that? Kathy bombarded me with questions. Her facial expression radiated disbelief. I would like our relationship to be normal because I have grown to love her mother. Kathy, please don't be hostile to me. Try to understand me. I love your mother, but I had no idea she had such a grown-up daughter. I thought Betty was her child. Your screaming knocked me out of reality. If I'm going to have any chance of getting on with my life, I need to find out the truth. Please, please help me figure it out. Tell me everything I need to know. Kathy looked up at me, wiped her eyes with her hands, tears welling up and partying. She was confused. Probably didn't know where to start. The truth she told me about her mother hit me like a shoe on the head. I think the girl understood my condition, so she kept silent for a long time to find the right words. David, the only thing I can tell you is that you must get away from your mother. You have no idea what kind of person she is, what she's capable of. You don't know our history. Then I'll tell you. You may not realize it, but I'm only 20 years old. Betty is actually my daughter. A person who knows the elementary rules of math later guessed that when I gave birth to her, I was only 15 years old. I got pregnant, immediately ran to tell my mom about it. I knew it wasn't meant to be, but it just happened. There was nowhere to go. Adriana yelled at me, so the neighbors probably heard it. At first, she forced me to have an abortion. I wouldn't go along with it. We fought for days. But at some point, Adriana said she agreed with my opinion, and I would give birth. I was very happy about this turn of events, as I did not expect my mom to give up so quickly. A week later, we went to the doctor. He told me that I had some malfunctions in my body that needed to be eliminated and prescribed me a medicine. When we got home, my mom said that I would not take these pills. Replace them with herbs. I had nothing against it, as folk medicine and people use for many years. For 2 days I drank these decoctions. My condition only worsened. One day I went to visit one of the relatives on my father's line, told her about my well-being and the fact that I was drinking the decoction. When the relative found out what herbs my mother was talking to me about, she started screaming and demanded that I never drink them again in my life. As it turned out, my mother was trying to induce premature labor in me. You see, David and she didn't care about my baby, and she didn't care about me either. From that day on, I never came home again. She tried to look for me, but my aunt carefully helped to hide me. When the day of delivery came, I was taken to the hospital. Here, of course, we made a mistake. This is the only place where we give birth. Naturally, my mom was already there waiting for me. Or rather, she paid the doctors to notify her. I was admitted to the labor and delivery ward. It was a difficult labor. To be honest, I don't remember much. When I woke up, I was told that my baby had died harder, and the pain I had probably never experienced in my life. I didn't know where to go. I decided I would go to my mother. After I was discharged, I went home, but no one was waiting for me there. My mom had changed all the locks on the door. She opened the door a little and told me to get out. I, on the other hand, had been persistent in my day, and so I didn't give up and try to beg off. I could see that mom was nervous. After a while, I heard a child screaming in our apartment. When I tried to ask who was crying, my mom just pushed me away. I flew into the wall, and she shut the door. To say I was stunned is like saying nothing. I had no idea that Adriana would turn out to be such a cruel woman who was willing to kill her granddaughter and hurt her daughter. As it turned out, the horror was yet to come. Kathy continued to narrate. I think my eyes grew wider and wider with each word she spoke. As it turned out, Adriana had bribed the doctors at the maternity hospital to tell them that her daughter Kathy had been admitted. And so they did. While the girl was in the throes of labor and her mother was already in the hospital, discussing with the doctors the scam they had pulled in the end. When Kathy woke up, she was told that the baby had been stillborn. In fact, the staff had forged documents in which the girl supposedly gave up her daughter. Apparently, the guardianship and custody authorities were also involved, as the girl was easily given to her birth grandmother, who eventually became her mother according to the documents. I just could not understand what motivated Adriana to such a disgusting act. At first, it even appeared that she initially wanted to kill this child, and then she took it away from her own daughter. I couldn't believe that I had fallen in love with such a disgusting person. After all, Adriana seemed to me to always be empathetic and merciful. At some point, I felt completely all the pain Kathy was feeling at the moment. I came to the girl, embraced her. She reciprocated. Immediately, she buried her nose in my chest and started sobbing again. I'll repeat it forever. There is nothing more horrible in the world than the tears of a woman. When Kathy calmed down, we talked some more time. I needed to get to know this person as well as possible to understand how to help her. All the while my phone was ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't want to talk to her at the time, so I didn't pick up the phone. It turned out that Kathy had just started a business a year ago. She was helping women become more beautiful. In a small amount of time, she had built up a steady base of clients who signed up a month in advance to see her for manicures, pedicures, and eyelash extensions. Not so long ago, she did all these procedures alone. But now she has a small premises with offices where specialists of the highest qualification work. I began to ask Kathy if she had tried to get her daughter back. The girl told me that for the first year and a half she had been beating on all doors, telling me that she had been deceived, that she had not given up her child. However, no one believed her. The police did not want to deal with the case as they considered it unimportant. The Child Welfare Authority simply closed their doors in her face because her mother had paid them generously. I realized that I could probably help legally get Kathy her daughter Betty back. However, I began to think through all of my options. The fact of the matter is that I believe that Adriana unjustifiably deprived her daughter of her child. In fact, Kathy has done nothing wrong other than getting pregnant at 15. Kathy, please calm down. I believe you have been treated unfairly, to say the least, and I promise I'll help you if things work out. You'll be embracing your own daughter tonight. David, but how are you going to do that? It's impossible. She'll never let me see her in my life. You realize I only saw my daughter when I was peeping at them. I couldn't get any closer and I watched all the time at a distance of 5-7 meters. If Adriana noticed me, she would immediately grab Betty and run away. One day I tried to go up after her, but she started screaming, calling the police. People around me started looking at me, grabbing their kids. For some reason, everyone thought I was trying to steal the baby. I just wanted to be with my daughter, who was mine, not this grown woman who was called my mother. At that moment, Adriana called again. Like last time, I had no intention of picking up the phone. However, I realized that this was the only opportunity to return the child to his real mothers. When I answered the phone, Adriana bombarded me with hundreds of questions. Mostly she wanted to know why I ran away. What am I doing now? Why didn't I pick up the phone? I tried to explain that everything that was happening had stirred up a storm of emotions in me that I couldn't control. In addition, I decided that she needed to feel guilty. So I mentioned that I was offended by her rash actions and secrecy. Adriana began to tell me that it was all a very complicated story. She was ashamed to admit everything. After that, the woman began to tell her version of events. Her story was that Kathy robbed a store when she was 15 and got pregnant by some criminal mastermind. She knew nothing about her pregnancy at all. She was confronted just a week before she gave birth. The whole time the investigation was going on. When Kathy gave birth, she was sentenced to 5 years. Because of that, the girl had to give up the baby, and Adriana decided to take on the burden. So what you're saying is that Kathy spent those 4 years in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? I asked her mother that question in front of Kathy. Yeah, that's nice. And that's just the way it was. In all those years, she never once thought of her daughter. How could I trust her? This little miracle. I mean, she's gonna go back downhill. Nobody goes back to normal after prison. I saw real rage on Kathy's face. She was ready to explode. I tried with all my might to show her to keep quiet. The belt couldn't be aware of the fact that it was just the two of us now. If the girl made a single sound that Adriana's ears would pick up, my plan would fail. The girl was holding on from the last of her strength. Adriana tried to make peace with me. I told her that I could only meet her if she took Betty with her. She agreed. She said that as soon as she picked up the girl from the babysitter, she would call me right back. Right after that, I started telling Kathy about the plan that had been stuck in my head. I assured her that if everything went smoothly, she would have a daughter sitting in her arms in just a few hours. The girl had nowhere to go, so she agreed with everything I told her. Half an hour later, I received a call from Adriana saying that she had picked up Betty and was now ready to meet me. I set up a meeting at the park. I was now with Kathy. For about 20 minutes, the girl and I discussed where she would be. I gave her the keys to my car, which I had moved closer to the park entrance. When Adriana called, I left Kathy and went to meet my favorite girls. Adriana had a frustrated look on her face. However, the cheerful and upbeat Betty lifted my spirits a little. The girl was happily running towards me. I was surprised by this, as she had only seen me once in her life. However, according to Adriana, the little girl kept asking about me. Of course, I was very flattered by this. As soon as Adriana came closer to me, she immediately started making excuses and telling again her whole story, which of course I did not believe. I tried to make it look like I believed every word she said and asked questions. What surprised me the most was the fact that Betty knew that Adriana was not her real mother. She knew there was some Kathy girl who had given birth to her, abandoned her, then moved far away. I can probably understand why Adriana told her everything about the baby girl, because as she gets older, she will start to realize that Adriana is old enough to be her mother. About 15 minutes later, Adriana's car key fob started beeping. The sound of an alarm was heard from afar. The woman was very frightened that someone might have hit her because she had parked in the wrong place. That was a good thing for me. To be honest, I thought we'd have a longer chat with her. However, Kathy didn't hesitate and went straight to the other entrance where her mother's car was parked to make her yell. I told Adriana that I had no problem staying with Betty for a while the woman went to the car and made sure she was okay. She thanked me and immediately darted off in the direction of the unauthorized parking lot. As soon as Adriana was out of sight, I picked Betty up in my arms and ran the other way. All along the road, I prayed to God that Kathy would make it back to my car in that short time. Surprisingly, the little girl wasn't scared. She took it all as a game, and I tried to joke with her along the way so as not to make people suspicious. Out of the park, Kathy showed up from around the corner, unlocking my car as she walked. I opened the back door, put Betty in it, and jumped behind the wheel myself. Kathy ran over and got in the back seat too and gave me the keys. I started the car and we drove off to wherever the hell we were going. I didn't really know where we were going because now I'm a real criminal, but I'm only a criminal under the law. What was more important to me was the reunion between mother and daughter. All along the way, Kathy hugged Betty and sobbed so bitterly. It was as if what had happened to her 4 years ago had just recently happened to her. 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't pick up the phone because I just didn't know what to say to her. I was bitter because I had loved her with all my heart, and she wasn't the person she claimed to be. When Kathy calmed down a little, she began to thank me. The words of her gratitude felt warm in my heart. At that moment, I thought that something could have worked out between us. After a little chatting with the girl, I decided that we would all go into hiding together. I decided that we need to go to my grandmother's house, which was located in 1,500 kilometers from my home. I inherited it, but I had never been there. All along the road, I sincerely hoped that the house was in good condition. It was in a remote village with only about 20 houses, but that didn't scare me. The main thing was that there would be internet and I would be able to work remotely. Perhaps Adriana will have a conscience and she will not go to the police and guardianship authorities. If she does, and we are found, then I will spend all my savings on the best lawyer I can find to help sort out this convoluted story. In the meantime, I will just hope that I have a happy and carefree life ahead of me, and Kathy and her beautiful daughter will be part of my family. Subscribe and click the bell.
The sun was slowly but surely moving toward zenith. Evelyn felt the hot rays of the sun burning her lower back through the thin cotton fabric of her t-shirt, the skin on her arms and ankles turning crimson. The woman paused for a moment to assess the extent of her defeat. What she saw shocked the woman, and she didn't hold back from commenting. By evening there will be bubbles, and then the skin will go stocking slip. I just went out, and I'm already burned. Like most blondes, Evelyn was afraid of sunbathing. Miracle creams never helped her, so she tried to stay out of the sun on particularly hot days. But to pull out today under the heat, she was forced by her neighbor. To be exact, not Nancy herself, but unwillingness to face her on the plot. She was an elderly woman in the village, disliked by many for her quarrelsome nature. Evelyn also had a bitter experience with her, and now always carefully avoided the neighbor's house. Even to the store for groceries, the young woman took a circuitous route, so as not to inadvertently stumble upon an unpleasant grandmother. For the same reason had to work in the vegetable garden in haste, and the most inopportune time. The nasty neighbor would go out to work on the beds when it was cold, and when the sun began to blaze, she would run away to her ramshackle house. There were different rumors about Nancy's building in the village, sometimes even the most ridiculous, but the landlady always called her dwelling a homestead, which pleased the local jokers. Village humorists amused the people with various pearls, the heroine of which was Nancy. The old woman in her own way perceived not humane attitude of her fellow villagers to her person. Despite her advanced years, the grandmother with youthful enthusiasm took revenge on offenders. In her arsenal were different ways, but most of all the grandmother liked to write complaints with invented facts. Nancy would file a denunciation with a policeman. Do you think Ethan had it all worked out? Ethan who? Well, I mean Tesla. My name may not be known yet, but who knows what will happen in 5 or 10 years? Trying to be calm, Evelyn interrupted the sweet dreams of her loser husband. John, you're as far away from Tesla as you are from the moon. You're a loser or a modern-day loser. Therefore, I'm going to stop subsidizing your ideas completely. And in simple terms, I'm not giving you another dime. So instead of doing this nonsense, you'd better think about your job. I can't keep you on my back forever. This reproach cut painfully on the male ego, and John's polished face immediately distorted with a grimace of hatred. You've decided to kick me around with reproaches. Have you forgotten the shit I pulled you out of? If I hadn't married you 8 years ago, you'd still be in the pigsty. I saved you from slave labor and poverty. Evelyn knew that John was about to blame her for all his failures, so to avoid making matters worse, she went out onto the porch in silence, but her raging husband couldn't stop. You shouldn't do that, Evelyn. You'll regret humiliating me, and you'll regret it more than once when I'm rich. It'll happen, and I'll pass you by. You'll beg me to forgive your callousness, but I won't even look in your direction. So that his expressive monologue would not be drowned in the void, the man also left the house after his wife. Evelyn, you're lost without me. Come to your senses, you wretch. Otherwise, you'll end up in a garbage dump. Noticing that his only listener was getting farther away from the house, John ran after her, but immediately fell into the trench he had dug more than a month ago. Evelyn laughed heartily. You see, John, this is a sign from above. I remember you promised to bring water into the house, then you promised to steward the house, and all your promises are in this hole. You just dug yourself. Evelyn could hear her husband swearing as he climbed out of the grassy trench. She had long since gotten used to his flamboyant performances. Several times she had tried to get away from the scandalized man, but always something stopped her. And in the whole world, she had no one more dear to her than John. Despite his quarrelsome character, her husband never raised a hand on her, and he was not in the dense raspberries behind the neighboring fence. A quiet rustling was heard, and after a while Nancy herself appeared. Good day to you, Evelyn, and good day to you, Nancy. Evelyn regretted that she had not noticed her neighbor in time. Now she would have to listen to the old woman's ramblings for the sake of propriety, but it didn't bother Nancy much that her appearance was not greeted with joy. She shook off from her warm vest plant debris, bloody raspberries, all chipped away, and no one cares, all abandoned. Evelyn was surprised not only by the old woman's inappropriate attire, but also by the eagerness with which she waded through the thorny shrubbery. The woman would hardly have made such a sacrifice for the sake of mere curiosity. Her hunch was at once confirmed. Nancy fixed her handkerchief on her small head, which resembled an unripe pumpkin. "Evelyn, how good it is to see you! There's a matter at hand, and I can't do without you." "I'm listening to you very carefully, Nancy." The thin lips of the old woman smiled, and her voice had an ingratiating tone. Evelyn knew she was about to ask for something. In the 8 years she'd lived with John, she'd learned to be calm about the most unusual requests, but she could tell from the way her neighbor was taking a long time to gather her thoughts that her grandmother was going to make some special demands. Nancy coughed for reassurance. "I'll tell you what, dear neighbor, my grandson, and he's a well-known man in town and almost an oligarch, has decided to revitalize our village." Although Evelyn didn't understand what her grandmother was getting at yet, she supported this initiative in absentia. It was high time to change something in our village. Grandmother was glad to have the support, and my Benjamin, too, thinks it's the right time to renew the village. He wants to build a bunch of stores and a factory to make juice. But first his grandson plans to build himself a 2-story house with an underground garage and parking lot. He told me a lot of things, but I didn't get all the details over the phone. And I'm very happy for you and your grandson. But what do I have to do with his plans? Now, honey, I'll explain everything. Benjamin likes it very much, this very spot where my manor house stands. It's close to the river and a short walk to the store. Well, but what's it got to do with me? Nancy could not bear it, and her peaceful tone changed to an angry one. What's not to understand? Our lots are right next to each other. Benjamin's house is to be built on the site of my estate. I've described everything to him in my will anyway. But my grandson wants to make a small park with a summer tent and fountains. He has 3 kids, and they need a separate place to play and have fun. Benjamin's other plans include Evelyn interrupting a pushy neighbor. "Thank you for sharing your favorite grandson's plans with me, but they don't interest me much. What do you want from me, Nancy?" The neighbor rolled her eyes in surprise. "Why do you pretend to be a silly fish, Evelyn? My grandson's got his sights set on your lot. What's not to understand? The house is registered to you, as far as I know. When Molly died, her mansion and the land passed into your hands? Am I wrong? What of it?" The old woman swung her hand like she was holding a saber. "All right, I can see it's no use talking to you. Benjamin will be here soon, but he'll talk differently. Don't threaten me with Nancy, and tell your Benjamin I'm not going to sell the house. Let him count on your inheritance." The old woman shook her dry fists even harder. "For your malicious character, Evelyn, God will not give you children." The old woman knew how to hurt her uncooperative neighbor. She had hit the sorest spot. Evelyn grabbed a dry twig lying on the floor and threw it at Nancy. "You old hag, go away." The log came down with a whistle somewhere in the bushes, but the young woman realized that she had hit exactly the target. Nancy from afar began to send threats. "I'll file a police report on you. You'll get jail time for self-harm." Evelyn no longer paid attention to the shouts of the old woman. She walked slowly towards the house, trying to answer the main question. "But why is all the misfortune dumped on my head?" At her appearance, John perked up. "Oh, is Evelyn mine? Tired? Do you want me to heat up dinner?" My husband acted as if there'd never been a quarrel this morning. He fussed to the kitchen, reporting on the work done. At first, I wanted to work in the garage, but then I thought I'd clean up the stain on the ceiling. Evelyn looked up. The problem spot was covered by a slanted piece of wallpaper of a completely different shade, but the husband was very pleased with his work. Wasn't that better? The woman was so tired from the noisy morning that she twisted her heart. "Yes, darling," almost imperceptible. The praise emboldened the man, and in his mind immediately activated a fantasy track. "Tomorrow I'll dig a trench, or I'll break my legs. It's unlikely we'll be able to bring water into the house this summer anyway. It's gonna take a lot of money. I will complete my project. I got a patent, and then you and I will live. We will go to the south." John noticed that his wife did not share his joy. "Evelyn, what's wrong? Is your back hurting again?" The woman often complained of lower back pain. Often she couldn't get out of bed for days. Then John treated her with ointments and even gave her injections himself, but now it was obvious that his wife was in a bad mood, not because of her back. "Just now, John, I had a fight with Nancy. The old witch has been ambushing me in her vegetable garden. What does she want?" Not her John, but her grandson. Briefly and in general terms, they want our lot in the house. John whistled in surprise, to which Evelyn immediately reacted sharply. "How many times have I told you not to whistle in the house? That's why we're always tight on money." "Oh, come on, all this superstition. Personally, I do not believe in any omens. You better tell me how much they're offering for our house." John looked at his wife with the look of a 5-year-old child who came to the toy store to choose something he liked. "By the way, I shared a desk with Benjamin for 3 years in junior high school. Then his parents moved to the capital. Our locals said that his dad had made it big, and that's the kind of guy who makes money. So it might be something to consider." Evelyn lowered herself gingerly into a chair. "John, are you serious? Or are you joking again?" "What jokes, Evelyn? We're being offered money, and that doesn't happen every day. Think of the prospects. I can finish my project, which in turn will get me a lucrative contract, and then—" "John, why are you always talking about yourself and your plans? This is my home, by the way, and maybe you should ask my opinion about it. And then have you thought about where we're gonna live if we sell the house?" The man looked at his wife with the same childish look. "I'm sorry, I didn't think about it. But we can rent an apartment or part of the house for a while." "All right, John, enough of this nonsense. I'm not selling the house to Benjamin or anyone else. You and your ideas are really going to make me homeless." John remained standing at a loss in the kitchen with a ladle in one hand. The man was trying to understand how he could refuse to accept money that was coming his way. Not a week after the unpleasant conversation with Nancy, the village was blessed with the arrival of Benjamin himself. The entire small population of the village poured out into the street to pay their respects to the iconic personage. Surprisingly, the scene resembled the arrival of royalty in Murom, depicted by the hand of a famous artist, only the place of the Russian empress was occupied by a successful businessman. Benjamin instantly caught the mood of the crowd. He smiled and bowed to the sides. There were, of course, those who looked at it with laughter, but most of them literally devoured their hope with their eyes. "I am glad to see you all, my fellow countrymen. I promise to do everything for the revival of our small homeland." For completeness of the picture, there was not enough candy or money, which by duty could scatter bodyguards. But for gifts, the local oligarch was apparently stingy. However, even without material support, the PR campaign was at a high level. Now everyone in the village was talking about Benjamin's arrival, and Nancy couldn't feel the ground beneath her feet with pride. John decided that he should take the opportunity too, and at dinner he said to his wife, as if by the way, "I think I'd ought to drop in on Benjamin. Maybe he'll remember a schoolmate." Evelyn suddenly supported her husband. "Come in. Maybe he'll at least offer you a job. If a man is planning to build, he'll need specialists. At least you'll be useful." "Of course, Evelyn, I appreciate your opinion, but I'm not a builder. I have a completely different specialty." The man spoke with an obvious challenge, alluding to his engineering degree. But his moment of glory didn't last long, because his wife mercilessly killed the untimely flight of fancy. "Your specialty, John, is sitting on my neck, and I'm tired of it. And you must realize I'm not giving you any more money. You have to start earning your own bread sometime." Another scandal was coming. John had already taken in more air in his lungs to respond with dignity to his wife's perfidy. But at that moment, there was a sudden knock at the door. The couple were very surprised to see that Mr. Benjamin himself came to visit them. The owner of the house began to make a fuss about the guest. "Welcome to our hearth. I didn't expect you to think of me, Benjamin, but it's a pleasure." The guest only nodded at the welcoming ritual, but paused. He sat down at the table, which Evelyn was promptly setting, and even drank the cup offered by his host, but that Benjamin traditionally made the first toast to the meeting. The men drank and reached for the pickles, which the hostess put on the table. "Help yourself, dear guest. My mistress makes great pickles." The businessman took another drink. "That's right, John. Only in our village women know how to pickle cucumbers." "Then let's have a drink, because it's uncomfortable to stand on one leg." "Don't think I'm not into this business, but I believe that ancestral traditions should be honored." "I agree, but don't pour me any more." "Hypertension. I don't want to die before my time. I've got a lot of work to do." Benjamin was an excellent speaker. He knew where to pause and where to raise the tone a little. Evelyn had briefly attended an art reading club at school, where they were taught how to speak properly. Now she watched the guest with undisguised interest, realizing that he did not appear to them for the sake of an old friendship with John. But the guest began from afar. "John, how many years has it been since you and I used to go trick-or-treating together at recess?" The landlord began to calculate in his mind. "Nearly 30. You left us right after 3rd grade." Benjamin sighed. "Yes, unfortunately, we can't know where life will take its next turn. I didn't think I would return to my home village one day either. But what amazes me the most is how small the world is. Why am I saying this? You're about to find out. Imagine when I shared my plan with my colleagues, there was a person in my team who also came from these places." The guest glared at Evelyn, but she calmly waited for the rest of the story. John was clearly puzzled by this turn of events. "Benjamin, why are you pulling the cat out of the bag? Just tell it like it is." "I didn't mean to offend you." "We're not offended, but let's get to the point, Benjamin. Who's that goose in your office who can't live without our village?" "I think we know who he is. It's Ethan." The plate slipped out of the hands of the surprised hostess. "Uncle Ethan, does he work for you?" I tell you, it's a small world. After all, the guest had achieved the desired effect and was now enjoying the result. "You see, dear Evelyn, I had a frank conversation with your uncle, during which it became clear that Ethan is very dissatisfied with his grandmother's death warrant. Not only that, but he considers the document invalid and even intends to contest it." Sensing an impending cloud, John intervened in the conversation. "But it's impossible." "You're wrong, friend. It is possible. After all, it hasn't even been a year since your grandmother died, has it? Or am I wrong, Evelyn?" Evelyn felt her mouth go dry. "What are you trying to say?" "My grandmother had her will drawn up and notarized while she was still alive." "That's understandable, but you're not a direct heir." "But Uncle Ethan refused, and now he's changed his mind. I suggest you reconsider. And remember, I only make a very good offer once and then. Oh, by the way, John, I'm planning to start construction before the fall, so I need reliable people. Can I offer you a job as an old friend?" But I'm not a builder. I'm more of an iron worker. That's fine. Will you be foreman or forewoman? Agreed? John stretched out. Well, I'm always ready. Then come over tomorrow. I'm staying at my grandmother's, but it's only temporary. As soon as I get things settled, I'll be back in town. What about construction? That's why I'm looking for reliable people. People who can be trusted with serious business and money. As soon as the door closed behind the guest, John cursed. What a creep, that Uncle Ethan of yours. Evelyn said quietly. I didn't expect him to be so mean either. How much misery has he caused, Mom? He's taking it out on me too. Evelyn's mother and grandmother had carefully avoided talking about her father when she was very young, and she hadn't been much interested in the matter either. But later she tried several times to find out where her father was and why he lived in another country. Uncle Ethan decided to enlighten her niece, Mother's own brother. One day at a family dinner he said, I think, Camille, it's time to tell the girl. Evelyn remembers well the mother's belittling look at her brother. Ethan, please don't. You know perfectly well that William is not to blame. Then who is? No, sweet sister. He left you with a 1-year-old child to go to your uncle's. He traded you and your daughter for money. Suddenly, the grandmother supported her son. Yes, that's exactly what happened. It's you, Camille, because of your blind love, did not finish the institute and could have made it in the people, if not for the early marriage. A 15-year-old girl was uncomfortable listening to her grandmother and uncle reproach her mom for loving her father so much. Evelyn decided to stand up for her mother. Is love a crime? The grandmother scoffed at her granddaughter. You're too young to reason. When you have children yourself, you'll know what it's like to raise them. I raised 2 of them on my own, worked 2 jobs, and kept piglets, and all for the sake of educating my children. Thank you that at least Ethan became a man, but Camille didn't appreciate my efforts. She fell in love. She got married in her 3rd year, and soon you were born. Grandma was ready to continue the story, but Mom shouted at her. Please do not fool the child's head. It was your efforts that made me a single mother. It was you, Mom, who then played a comedy with your illness when William came to fetch us. It was you who separated daughter and father. After this, the relatives began to shower at each other with reproaches. Evelyn was disgusted with them and ran away to a friend's house. And soon there was a misfortune with my mother. When she was feeding the pigs, and my grandmother had 8 of them, she was attacked by a wild boar. The woman screamed for a long time, but no one heard her. Only late in the evening, Grandma suddenly realized, Evelyn, where's Camille? I saw her come home from work, and then she disappeared. The girl found her mother unconscious. When the hospital x-rayed her, the doctors were shocked. Poor thing. She had multiple fractures, damaged internal organs. Mom was in the hospital for months. She had one operation after another, but she got weaker and weaker every day. Evelyn ran straight to the hospital after school and sat by her sick mother's bedside for hours. Lessons had to be done late at night. Grandmother visited her daughter only 3 times. I have no time to go to hospitals. If I don't feed them in time, they'll go to waste. And Evelyn, you'd be less likely to go there, just for 5 minutes, and that's enough. I can't do without a helper. One day, Evelyn couldn't stand the injustice. Grandma, aren't you ashamed? Mom is your own daughter, and you treat her as if she were your stepdaughter. But everything is for Uncle Ethan, and those pigs, and the damn boar that trampled on Mama. Everything is for him, too. The shocked Molly could not utter a word, and Evelyn cried and screamed with resentment. I heartily wish that Boar would die. The old woman immediately came to her senses and slapped her granddaughter. "I wish your tongue was dead. The boar weighs over 10 pounds. That evening, Evelyn did not come home to spend the night. She spent the night sitting next to her mother, whose condition had deteriorated sharply. The woman was falling into a restless sleep, then calling her. In the morning she asked, "Daughter, at home, in my album there are pictures where we are all together, you and me, and your dad. Don't believe it. He's a very good man. It's just that everything's worked out against us. If I get better, you and I will go to my dad. There's his address right to him." 2 days later, Mom died. Evelyn looked for the picture the dying woman had mentioned in the papers, but she couldn't find it. And then she forgot about that picture, because a completely different life began for her. Now all household chores fell on the fragile shoulders of a 16-year-old girl. After school, she would run home to feed the pigs and chickens. Then she had to weed the beds that stretched as far as the horizon. During summer vacations, when school friends and girlfriends went to the sea with their parents or vacationed in health camps, Evelyn did not unbend her back from morning till late in the evening. The list of her duties was enormous, and her grandmother made sure that every item was completed. Twice a year, Uncle Ethan came in from out of town. He would fill the car to the brim with groceries, and without hiding his pleasure, drive back. The hard labor took its toll on the girl's health. She was found to have a herniated spine, and later doctors discovered a problem in the female side. So John was right about one thing. He did spare her from slave labor when he proposed to become his wife. Molly took the news of her granddaughter's marriage in stride. She threw a tantrum. I'm everything to her, and she decided to throw me away. Ungrateful. The future son-in-law listened to these unfair claims and advised Molly to attract his son to hard labor. To the grandmother, this suggestion amounted to an insult, and she shoved John out the door. It was then that Evelyn first disobeyed her old grandmother and left home with her fiancé. At one time, they were staying with her husband's parents, where John's brother John and his family lived. About a year passed, and Molly showed up for a visit. The woman cried for a long time, complained about her fate, and then fell on her knees in front of her granddaughter and began to ask for her forgiveness. "Forgive me, Evelyn. Forgive me for everything. Since you left me, I can't find a place for myself. Please come back. Live with me at my place. I've used up all the livestock. No, I don't have the health to take care of animals." It was unbearable to watch the humiliation of a native person, and the young people returned to Molly's house. Grandmother behaved quietly, tried not to interfere in the family affairs of her granddaughter. She was often ill, and Evelyn did not leave her bedside for 24 hours, just like when her mother was dying. Molly was very homesick, and she was even more worried about Uncle Ethan. "Evelyn, you should call him." "What's wrong? Why isn't he coming? He forgot his mother." The girl dialed her uncle's number many times, but he immediately referred to the lack of time. John sincerely felt sorry for the old woman. He heard these requests, but only Evelyn once in the heart said everything he thought about her uncle. "That's your Uncle Ethan, you bastard. When the old woman was dying, tending the cattle so that he and his children could eat, then he'd show up. And the helpless mother, he has no time to visit her. For 6 years, the son only once visited his mother, but stayed only an hour." Shortly after this visit, Molly and decided to redo the will in favor of her granddaughter. Shortly before her death, she gave her a photograph of her happy parents holding her in their arms. On the back of the photo was an address in English. "It's all my fault, Evelyn. I didn't want Camille to go abroad, and I separated her from William. He was a positive guy, he was already a candidate, and he was invited to work there. And then we came to get you, and I wouldn't let Camille go. But the worst part was that when he called once, I lied and said that Camille had married a good man. Evelyn listened to her grandmother's confession, but her anger was gone. She realized that nothing could be changed and forgave her grandmother. After her death, there was only one close person left in the whole world. Evelyn was afraid that one day he would betray her, but there is a belief that what one fears will happen one day. Just as Benjamin had promised, in August a big construction project was underway in the village. John enthusiastically took up the task assigned to him. From early in the morning until late at night, he was at the site he was entrusted with. With his wife, he rarely shared his work, answering her questions unambiguously. Everything is normal, the work is going on, the salary drops into the account. But a month passed, then the second, but the promised salary was not brought to the house. He completely forgot about his super project and rarely visited the garage. As it turned out later, Evelyn had no idea what her husband had done with other people's money. It all came out of the blue. One day John came home earlier than usual, his face pale as chalk and his hands shaking. "Evelyn, I need money right away. Lots of money." The woman's heart sank in a premonition of bad things to come. "What's wrong?" That simple question sent her husband into a rage. For the first time in his life, he took a swing at her. "Why do you feign saintly naivete?" "I thought I told you in plain language that I need money, and it's urgent. Are you my wife or not?" Evelyn was silent. She was shivering, and her hands and feet were ice cold. At last she got over her excitement. "I too, John, asked you in plain language. What's wrong? I have a right to know. You're singing about your rights again. This is all your fault, sending me to work for that ashhole. You don't have enough money. I think you're the one who's been stealing it from me. What should I do this time? Help me. For the last time, let's sell the Dan house while that bastard's offer still stands. Can you explain to me properly why this is so urgent? All right, look. I just got screwed again, and I've decided to temporarily divert some of the money Benjamin gave me for materials to another project. What was it? There was a lucrative venture, and I thought I'd invest in it for a nice dividend. But it didn't work out. I ran into some crooks, and today, as luck would have it, Benjamin demanded all the invoices. That's the story. Evelyn didn't want to hear from the man anymore. She didn't care anymore. All right, if we sell this house, or if Uncle Ethan sues us for it anyway, where do you think you're going to live? That was a question John couldn't answer. Uncle Ethan showed up in the morning. Well, weren't you expecting young people? I see that I've been on your heads like a snowball. But it's a good thing, because you can put all the dots on the inheritance question. Well, I filed a lawsuit to review this case, of course. I hired a good lawyer, so not to spoil the nerves of neither you nor myself, I suggest you move out of your parents' house. After all, anyway, then the bailiffs will put you out, and that the judges will decide the case in my favor, I do not doubt at all. I'm the son and Evelyn is the granddaughter. The law is on my side, and the fact that my mother made a will before she died, she wasn't in her right mind. I've got the certificate. In short, I'll give you 24 hours. Uncle Ethan left. Evelyn began to pack her things. John asked in surprise, "Where are you going?" "Wherever I want to go." "What about me? Don't you realize that Benjamin will roll me for money?" At that moment, the door opened wide, and the autumn wind blew in. John looked at Benjamin with horror. "Wow! And we were just thinking about you and your wife, just like the proverb says. Think of something and it will appear." The joke turned out to be a bad one, and the next moment, John's body slammed into the opposite wall. "Why, Benjamin?" "You know why." Ignoring Evelyn and John, who was in pain, the guest defiantly set the table in the center of the living room. Well, are we going to joke again, or are we going to talk seriously? I'm talking to both of you. And to you, Evelyn, that goes for you too. What's it got to do with me? He wasted your money, deal with him. No, that wasn't the deal. John, your husband? What's that supposed to mean? Because my guys are gonna cut him to ribbons. He's a big hit, but this time he won't make it between construction sites. I need the money. John made it out of the corner. Benjamin, honestly, I'll make it up to you. I'll work on your construction site for free for a year. That's a good point, but it's not you, Ashole. It's your wife. And for you as a punishment, I have picked up another mission, and I don't think you will like it. But there are no other options if you want to live. John began to crawl on his knees in front of Benjamin. It was disgusting to watch this picture of humiliation. And Evelyn grabbed her suitcase, but the guest squeezed her hand, but the woman tried to break free. Let go, you're hurting me. But Benjamin squeezed the vise even harder. Evelyn screamed, Madam, it will hurt you even more if I entrust you to my boys. They like to work on women, so you'd better keep your head down. Well, you're loaning your woman out. I am, Benjamin. You can have her forever. Evelyn watched her husband tearfully crawl at the feet of his former classmate. She felt no pity for him, only contempt and disdain. Benjamin read all of this in the betrayed woman's gaze. He took her suitcase with one hand and led her to the exit. At the door, Evelyn turned around as if she were saying goodbye to her past life forever. Come on, you don't want to disturb yourself with such an unpleasant sight. Benjamin pushed the woman lightly toward the exit. The door slammed shut, but outside they could hear John wailing at the top of his voice. Evelyn, stay. I shall perish without you. The businessman spat contemptuously. You wretch, it's you who will be doomed if you stay with this man. Forgive me for some inflection, but I'm really ready to tear John apart. He's been such a jerk to me. I don't know how to untie myself now. Benjamin's words sounded quite human, and Evelyn looked at him in surprise. I don't understand. Do you really want me to be your slave? Yes and no. Come, let's talk. I have a proposition for you. You can refuse, of course, but then I'll ask you to return all the money your husband has squandered. Anyway, he's still your husband, but you'll still take the house, won't you? Benjamin nodded. I will, and no one can stop me, as you have already realized. But the only problem is that the money the house is worth won't be enough to pay off the debt. Do you have any idea how much he cut me off? You see, on the one hand, I don't care about anyone who lives here. You're a smart woman, I think you know that, and I don't care about your idiot husband. The fact that I'll give him a chance is a big deal for you. Benjamin stopped in front of his car, opened the door for Evelyn. You all believe in miracles here in the village. Miracles don't happen. In the city, they would have killed the whole family for that amount of money, and I'm talking to you. He put Evelyn in the car. They drove off. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. I want to tell you right away, Evelyn, if you think about running away, your John will be totally screwed. So a man's life depends on you. Evelyn understood now. So sorry. And what should I do? Most importantly, for how long? How long, I haven't counted it yet. It all depends on your work. But what to do now you'll see. They drove to the edge of the village. There was no way to see it from the village, and now Evelyn was numb. It had changed completely in a matter of months. Huge greenhouses stood in rows, apples and pears were planted, and some other trees that were unfamiliar to Evelyn. A large wooden building stood a little to the side. Here, someone should be in charge of all this. not only to work, but also to make others work and to be responsible. Do you understand, Evelyn? Not really. But look, you'll do a good job, and everyone should do a good job, and I'll be there to watch. And if you don't do a good job, the debt won't go down. And if the debt doesn't go down, you'll have to work here for a long time. Only now Evelyn realized what a trap she'd fallen into. And John will work off the debt too, won't he? Benjamin laughed. No, Evelyn. Your husband's as useless as a goat's milk. Not only is he an idler, but he's also a thief. So you, and only you, will repay the debt. But that's not fair. Evelyn almost cried. Where have you seen justice in our world, Evelyn? Besides, you heard yourself that your husband gave you to me for debts. I'm going to the police. The woman grasped the doorknob with determination. Of course you will. I've got plenty of testimony about how you and your husband cleaned me out together. Believe me, for that amount of money, you two will go to jail for a long time. You're such scum. Benjamin laughed again. I have to agree with you there. If I wasn't trash, I'd be living, like you and John, in utter poverty and dung. Shall we go? I'll help you carry the suitcase. They came to a wooden building. There was no other word for it, as Evelyn realized she wasn't the first one here. A woman came out to them, looking more like a man. Well, what else did they bring? Is it any good, or is it just as inept as the others? Well, Wendy, that's what you're here for, to keep everyone working like a bee. Wendy laughed. You know I have a fly to collect honey. Benjamin turned around and walked to the car without saying goodbye. Evelyn caught up with him. Don't forget to count the debt, so I know how long I have to work here. I'll do that when I have time. Don't worry, you'll be working here for a long time. Still, I might want to pay you back in money. Benjamin looked at her like she was crazy and went on his way. As it turned out, there were already several unfortunates like Evelyn here. One was working off her husband's debt, who had recklessly wrecked Benjamin's car, and her husband was at home babysitting. They had 2 children. The second had racked up credit, and Benjamin had saved her. She thought he was a kind man and ended up here. In fact, they were all here voluntarily, well, or almost voluntarily, because if any of them left, quit their jobs, the problems would pour in like a cornucopia. Benjamin didn't keep anyone by force. You could go home, you could go home. True, Evelyn didn't have a home. She got out a week later, wanted to show John what her hands had become and spit in his face. But she came out and the house was gone. In place of the house, where her favorite roses had grown, construction was in full swing. Evelyn cried and turned back. Evelyn? She turned around. Standing next to her was Grandma Clara. She used to come to them often when her grandmother was alive. She used to swear at her grandmother, but she didn't take offense. They had been friends for a long time. Hello, Baba Clara. Evelyn sighed. I don't understand something. The house has been sold. There's no one here. I saw John leaving with his suitcases. Why aren't you with him? I'm not with him. I'm working. For Benjamin? They say he doesn't pay at all. He's trying to cheat, or are people lying? She waved her hand and cried, What are you, a girl? Tell me, what happened to you? I haven't seen you in 6 months, and already you've changed so much. Evelyn and Grandma Clara sat down on the grass, and Evelyn told her everything. She knew she couldn't help her, but she felt a little better. The old woman shook her head. I don't know who's the bigger bitch in this situation. You're John or Benjamin? But Benjamin is understandable. He grew up to be a bastard from a young age. But John, I'd kill him. It's all your fault, Evelyn. You should have sent him to work, not let him eat. Where have you seen that? A big forehead sitting on his grandmother's neck. Baba Clara spat and sat and thought, "That's it, Evelyn. You should look for your father." Evelyn looked at Clara in amazement. "And you know about him?" "Well, who doesn't know about him? But if you're younger, but William was a good guy. Molly, she's such a bastard. She looks like Benjamin. What's she been doing with this farm all her life? She's got herself a golden coffin or something. She couldn't let Camille go, not out of love, but because someone had to look after her farm. It can't be, Grandmother said. She just didn't want to part with us." Clara waved her hand. "You can think what you like, of course, but I knew your grandmother much better than that. Never needed anyone for her but her Ethan. God damn it, every man is a piece of shit. Maybe we're in an abnormal zone here." Clara wondered. Evelyn smiled. Clara's grandmother had always loved everything unusual and otherworldly. Her daughter fought with her as much as she could. Twice they extinguished the house, because Clara lit candles from the evil power and forgot about them. All right, we managed. Once my daughter wanted to heat the stove. The frosts were fierce then. She opened the flap, and instead of a place to put firewood, there was a fresh brickwork. It's good that she didn't have time to grasp it. They broke it, and Clara too. She was making a hole in the world. Grandma was good at everything, but if something got into her head, the old lady never saw Evelyn again. She quickly got up, looked around, and authoritatively declared to herself, "That's right, abnormal. We must save the world." She walked briskly into the village. Evelyn sighed. "Yes, you'll have a hard time with her. Who knows when she'll get it into her head?" When Evelyn returned, the neighbor was lying on her stomach, texting on her laptop. "Lisa, listen, is it real, for example, in the same social networks to find a person abroad?" "Of course it's real. Why do you ask? Did you find a rich relative who is ready to pay for you?" "Oh, come on. I just wanted to try to find one. So let's try. I've talked to my folks. I've cried, so I'm free. How much longer?" 2 months, and then I'm free if I don't get any more fines." Evelyn sighed. By her calculations, she'd be working here for almost a year, and that was if there were no fines, and fines came very quickly. She pulled out a picture, showed it to Lisa, who started typing something quickly. "Look, there it is." Evelyn's palms were sweating. "There's what?" "A man with that name." "Evelyn, look, he's online." "Lisa, don't speak in riddles?" "Well, he's online now." "Come on, what should I write him?" "Nothing, are you crazy?" "No, what do you mean you don't text him? You need him for something." Evelyn remembered John, remembered her home, her whole life, and gave up. At least it's an outlet. "Write hello, William. This is Evelyn, Camille's daughter." Lisa chuckled. "You're like a letter from the front." "Lisa, I'll be quiet, I'll be quiet." "Oh, look, I read it." "Aye, she hasn't said a word yet. Probably won't answer." Evelyn lay down and was just about to doze off when Lisa pushed her. "He did. That's a hell of a thing to say." "Well, read it, and I'm going to go have a smoke so I don't get in the way." Evelyn looked at Lisa gratefully and sat down in front of the laptop. She read the words, wiped her tears, reread again. Lisa returned and saw Evelyn all in tears. She sighed. "That's what, Mother. The laptop is on your bed, and I need to sleep. I don't want to get it tomorrow." "Don't stay up too long. You have to work tomorrow, too." William apologized for not convincing Camille to go against Molly's wishes, for being resentful and not letting on for years. Then work got in the way, one thing and another. When he woke up, he decided he didn't need him anymore. Camille's been married a long time, and the daughter probably calls that man daddy. Mom had never been married, not even one day. William was silent for a while. Evelyn thought he would never answer again. I had the thought, but then I decided that no matter how cruel Molly was, she wouldn't lie like that. So she did. Do you have a wife, kids? Evelyn, you don't have to tell me. I have no one. I tried to get married. I lasted 6 months twice, but I called my wives Camille. And then I stopped trying. And God didn't give me children. I mean, He did, but I lost them. But it's not your fault, is it? Another long pause. It's my fault. It's always the man's fault, because he should be stronger, wiser, smarter, you know? It's all my fault. And now I'm dying. I don't have much time left, and I was still afraid to write to you. Dying? Why? There's Evelyn, a disease that doesn't look at places or people. It just goes and takes whoever it wants with it. Of course, Evelyn knew everything. She felt tears running down her cheeks. It was so hurtful, so painful to realize that she had just found her father and wouldn't even get to see him. Evelyn, why don't we video call tomorrow? Oh, I don't know how to do that. If Lisa says it's okay, she'll help you. So that's not you in the picture. No, of course I'll ask her. See you tomorrow. Evelyn has been getting reprimands all day. She got so many fines that Lisa couldn't take it anymore. She was waiting in the greenhouse next to Evelyn. What's wrong with you today? Lisa, you see, that man you found yesterday, he's my father. And Evelyn briefly told her the story of her family. Lisa exhaled. Wow, I'm sorry, your family is a mess. Evelyn, so maybe he's rich? Evelyn stared at her with an uncomprehending stare. Even if he is, which I doubt, so what? So what? He could just pay off that creep, and you'd be free. Oh, Lisa, you say that too. A man dies and I have to ask for money? We've never met. What's the big deal? You're so interesting, you're used by everyone, and you can't. I won't. If you'll let me, we'd like to talk on the video conference today. Oh, you're such an idiot. Tell me, of course. What do you want me to do? As soon as my father saw her, he cried, God, you look just like Camille. How is she? Mom's dead. Dead? And Grandma? She's gone too. They talked for almost an hour. Then they said goodbye. They're putting me in the hospital tomorrow. They won't let me die in peace. And then I'll write to you again. All right, I'll be waiting. When a crying Evelyn returned the laptop, and Lisa asked, So did you tell him about your life? No, why? You should see him, he's so sick. Oh, Evelyn, oh, stupid. Evelyn fell asleep almost immediately. She woke up in the night and saw Lisa sitting on her laptop. She even asked, What's wrong, what? Lisa jumped up. What? No, the kid has a fever. Go back to sleep. I'm going to bed too. And the workday began again. Evelyn learned to ignore the pain in her back, learned not to look at her bloody hands. She just worked and counted the days. What was the use of counting them? 5 would be taken away, 2 added for fines. Benjamin showed up from time to time. He seemed to take a special pleasure in humiliating Evelyn. Probably because she was a native of the village where the oligarch himself was born and almost grew up. Evelyn, you don't look so good. Admittedly, when you lived with your husband, you looked much better. But although it's probably much better to live like behind a stone wall, and he chuckled at his own joke, Evelyn was silent. She wanted to slap his fat face, but she knew she couldn't. A week passed, then another. Every night when Lisa opened her laptop, Evelyn looked at her questioningly, but she just shook her head. Evelyn's father was no longer online. The day came when the disgruntled warden gave Lisa her papers. Everyone came out to see her off. Lisa took Evelyn aside. "I'm sorry. I'm probably the reason your dad hasn't been in touch anymore. But you know, to me, it's better than no father at all." "I don't know what you mean." Evelyn looked at Lisa and really didn't understand anything. Lisa sighed. "The day you talked to him, I texted him back, and I told him all about your story, about your debt, about your husband, about everything. And he said he'd help, and then I guess he changed his mind." "Lisa, why?" Lisa shook her head. "Because, is he a father or not? He's never helped you once in his life, and now he can. You may or may not be offended, but I think I did the right thing." Lisa left and Evelyn returned to her room lost. Now, even if her dad does show up online, she won't know about it. Well, then it's not fate. 7 more months ahead, no time to think and dream at all. Just before Christmas, when the main job was over and the new one was just beginning, Evelyn decided to go to the store. She had nowhere to live, of course, but Christmas is Christmas. Even the warden had gone home for the weekend, though no one could believe she had a family at all. At the store, the clerk crossed her arms when she saw Evelyn. "Evelyn, you?" "I'm Kathy. Why are you looking at me like I'm a ghost?" "Well, Evelyn, no offense, but you've aged 20 years. "I know, Kathy, I know. Why don't you sell it to me quick before somebody else does?" "Yeah, sure." Kathy ran around the store, picking up what Evelyn was showing and talking nonstop. "What, do you work for our tycoon?" "I do, but they say he doesn't pay at all, and the people aren't happy. He evicted people from their homes, not the whole village, but only those who couldn't fight back. And he's ruined everything with his construction." Evelyn grinned. It can't be. Remember how they greeted him, almost throwing their hats in the air? Kathy looked at her. "You shouldn't say that, Evelyn. People really thought the village would be revived, but now it feels like he's a landowner and everyone else is a serf." Evelyn was silent. She knew what serfs were like. "Did you hear yours?" Evelyn was on her way out, but stopped. "Yours is playing in town." "Huh. Well, he lost a lot of money. They say he was beaten up for his debts, even hospitalized. And then our people met him. He said he was getting married. An old woman, but rich." Evelyn laughed. "Oh, John, he wants to ride a crooked mare to heaven." The mood lightened a little. Evelyn took the road she had not taken in a long time, so as not to see an empty place instead of her home. But the place was no longer empty. There was a new house, which was made under the old. She stood for a while and went on her way. She didn't even notice how a figure separated from the house and followed her. "Excuse me, could you please tell me how I can find Evelyn?" She stopped. She didn't know this man, and she'd never seen him before. In fact, he was kind of strange and dressed differently and had a fashionable haircut. "I'm Evelyn. Who are you?" "Oh, for some reason I thought it was you. You look just like your mom." He pulled out the exact same picture she had. My heart sank. "Who are you?" "My name is James. I'm your father's executor." Now Evelyn realized what confused her the most. Was this man pronouncing words too correctly, like a speech therapist or a foreigner? Is there somewhere we can talk, but out of sight? "I take it we don't need eyes on us just yet." "Well, if only on the shore, where the kids go in summer, but now there's no one there." They walked to the river. Evelyn shook the snow off the bench and sat down. "What are you doing? The bench is cold." She smiled. "I can't stand. My back really hurts." She pulled her hand out of the mitten, and the man rounded his eyes when he saw her bruised, haggard hands. "Why are you like this?" Evelyn quickly hid her hands in the mittens. What do you want to talk to me about? Is Papa dead? Yes. William passed away 2 months ago, but in the hospital, in the presence of a notary witnesses, he gave clear orders regarding you. We never got a chance to talk, to sit down. Evelyn wiped away a tear. What orders? The man sat down beside her and opened the folder. The orders are very simple. William instructed me to give you everything he had. I suspect you won't agree to go abroad. He sold everything he had there 2 weeks before he died. All the money, all the assets and more are now yours. I, as his advisor and assistant, will stay with you for the first time. I will help you so that no one will cheat you, so that you will be able to invest the money profitably. As soon as you understand everything, I will be able to leave you. I'm aware of your problem. The first thing I suggest is that you pay off your debt, which will cause a lot of trouble for the person who dumped it on you. The second thing is to get a good night's rest and a good night's sleep, and only then do business. Evelyn stared at him in amazement. Money so much that it's enough for a debt. The man smiled. Your money is enough to pay 1,000 such debts. He couldn't stand it, he laughed. You have such a face now. William was a very wealthy man. His work was insanely valued, but he was far from the richest. So how do I get in touch with this man? Through the warden. James's eyebrows flew upwards. I'm sorry, I must have misheard you. Evelyn laughed now. Oh, now you should see your face. Let's go down the road and I'll tell you all about it. Tell me, is English your first language? Oh, my grandmother. James told her a whole story about how his grandmother had once fled America, but made her children and grandchildren speak only English at home. By the time Evelyn finished her story, they had reached the wooden structure where Wendy stood with her arms at her sides. What's up, Queen? Another fine. Evelyn wanted to start making excuses, as she usually did, but James stepped forward. I beg your pardon, who are you? Who are you? I'm Evelyn's attorney. I'd very much like to speak to the man to whom Evelyn allegedly owes money. Wendy, who hadn't even had a chance to change out of her city clothes yet, reached into her pocket for her phone. I'll call now, of course. Lawyer. Well, that's funny. Please tell Mr. Benjamin to grab his lawyer or notary. Only in the presence of 2 persons, we will transfer the debt to him. Wendy already looked at James in amazement and stepped farther away to explain to the owner what was the matter. The girls came out of the outbuilding. They looked at Evelyn with envy. She gave them a hug. Don't you think I'm not leaving you? James says he will take Benjamin at once, and very soon he will be where he ought to be. The girls sighed, hugged Evelyn, and asked her to come and see them, even if it didn't work out. Benjamin arrived an hour later. In that time, Evelyn and those who worked with her had time to decorate the Christmas tree in the yard. Strangely, Wendy didn't even chase the others away to work. She sat and quietly pondered whether she should run away already or whether she could still work. Who's so wealthy around here? James stood up. Good afternoon. I'm Evelyn's attorney. She'd like to pay you some money. You, in turn, must give a receipt and write that you have no claims against her. Oh, I can't believe it, Evelyn. Are you a foreigner or something? That's right. I was Evelyn's father's attorney and trustee, and now I'm helping Evelyn with what's called an inheritance, and the big inheritance. Benjamin's smile faded a little. He remembered those conversations from his childhood, when adults had said that Evelyn had a father abroad, but no one knew for sure, and it turned out to be true. The inheritance, apparently, is not bad at all, since even from there the man flew. After 2 o'clock, Benjamin, sweating, looked at the departing couple. The man who had come with him said, "Oh, Benjamin, the guy is very competent. He can twist this receipt so that you will not feel bad. If I were you, I'd wrap it up real quick and sit tight. No way. I was not born to be told what to do by Benjamin. The man shook his head. Well, that's for you to say. It's my business to warn you. And yes, and I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. I don't feel like sitting down for company. He got into his car and drove away quickly. Benjamin turned around and saw the women who worked for him, or rather worked off their debts. What are you looking at? You can leave, but only temporarily. Whoever wants to can continue working. The salary is twice as much. After 20 minutes, he and Wendy were the only ones left. Wendy took out a travel bag. You, Benjamin, have calculated me. I'm going too. He looked at her angrily. Well, you'll get around. You have to work, and you're running away. Well, I'll get by. I think the journalists in our town would be very interested to hear me. Wendy laughed. She very rarely laughed, and rightly so. Her laughter was like the bleating of a goat. Benjamin threw a wad of money on the table and walked out. James brought Evelyn to the most beautiful hotel in town. This is your room. Mine is across the hall. You get some rest and sleep, and I'll be there, say 5 o'clock. We'll order dinner, and I'll give you everything. And then we'll figure it out as we go along. Okay. Thank you very much. She didn't get much sleep. She took a bath, dried her hair, thought about buying some cream. Her hands were sore. Her skin chapped from work. Decided that later, tonight to rest, but she never got to sleep. In the evening, James handed her a card. This is your card. It's automatic. You can use it to pay for anything you want. Here's the paperwork. It's new. I haven't activated it yet. This is what you need to read. Here's the patent information. You are now the owner of a brand of healing equipment. When you get up to speed, you'll need to renegotiate with some of the companies that manufacture them. Evelyn looked at him with those eyes. Don't be afraid of anything. You'll figure it all out, and I'll help you. You have very tired eyes. I suggest we split up and go to bed. And tomorrow, you could go to the barber shop. I don't know. What else do women need to be happy? All the business can wait. Thank you, James. Can I ask you a question? Yes, of course. You're here with me, but I suppose you have a family waiting for you at home? He froze for a second. No, my family died. My wife and young son were killed in the mountains. I didn't want to live either. If it weren't for your father, we wouldn't be talking right now. Please forgive me. It's okay. You didn't know. Good night to you. To be honest, Evelyn was even a little tired of having fun. In the morning, while James was probably asleep, she quietly left the room. Through the night, she slept like she was a carefree infant. She waved for a cab. The car immediately stopped in front of her. Where are we going? Do you know where we have expensive, fashionable clothing stores in the city? The elderly man smiled. I know everything. 15 minutes later, he stopped at a magician's shop. He's so handsome. She paid the cab driver and went inside. A woman immediately approached her. What are you interested in? Evelyn looked around and answered with a smile. Everything. The woman raised an eyebrow, immediately snapped her fingers, and 2 young girls appeared beside her. Cindy, lingerie, Kelly, dress and suits, and I'll take care of outerwear. 2 o'clock Evelyn was like being in a fashion show. She tried on so many things. Most she put off to buy. One outfit, a pantsuit paired with a short mink coat she really liked. The woman who met her suddenly said, "Wait, you can't go outside in those shoes." She quickly dialed someone's number. And already in 10 minutes, Evelyn did not even have time to finish her coffee. A girl with several boxes appeared in the store. Now we're all set. Do you want your clothes packed? Can you throw them away? The woman smiled. With great pleasure. There's a great beauty parlor nearby. The owner is a friend of mine. If you want, I'll call and ask to be taken off the waiting list. Oh, thank you. I'd love to. The beauty parlor was literally 2 houses down. Next to the entrance to the salon where the grocery store entrance was, Evelyn smiled to herself. A year ago, she would have chosen that entrance. John had been stomping outside the store for an hour now. What kind of person was Miranda? She'd gone to get something nice for dinner and had been at the store for an hour. On the one hand, it's good, because I don't have to listen to her stupid jokes and endure her endless touching. On the other hand, I can't leave. Miranda already bought him a car. It may not be the most expensive, but John's never had one. And she promised that if he behaved well, she'd pay off his debt. It wasn't a huge debt, but John had nowhere to get it, and they could beat his head off for it. So he was on his best behavior, trying to do his best. John, are you there? He turned around sharply. Oh, how he hated unexpected meetings with acquaintances, because most of them owed him money. Kathy? Hi. It was just the clerk from the village store. You didn't come to the city from your village, did you? Yeah, I did. I need to pick up a few things. Yeah, there's nothing in the village. Kathy took a look at the car. I see you bought a car. John grimaced. Oh, don't. Evelyn works there, and you're so bad. It's not my fault Benjamin picked it out. Kathy raised an eyebrow in surprise. I wasn't going to. And Evelyn's not working. She paid that Benjamin, and she's free to go. In fact, her lawyer made such a mess of it that he shut his company down in a flash. Kathy, are you confused? What's her lawyer? Where from? Oh, you probably don't know anything. Evelyn's father turned up and died. And he lived abroad. He was a millionaire, even more. So now Evelyn is the heiress to the whole fortune. You're lying. I didn't think so. The women who worked there told me that her lawyers said she'd put everyone in jail and buy them all. Kathy was pleased with the effect it had. Of course, no Broads had said anything, but let the creep know. Kathy went about her business, and John wondered, what does that mean? His wife is like a cheese and butter, and he has to live with an old woman to get by on a trifle. It's not right. What we need to do is this. We've got to get back to Evelyn. John's mind was already churning with the most fantastic ideas. He turned around and became numb. A cab that had stopped nearby was being driven by a woman. Or rather, it wasn't a woman, it was a queen. Expensive fur coat, hairdo, high-heeled boots. John rubbed his eyes. No, there could be no mistake. It was Evelyn. While he was thinking, the cab drove off, taking his wife with it. Oh, you weren't lying, Kathy. Before he could think, a shrill voice came from across the street. John, why are you standing there like a statue? Or do you think I'm going to carry the bags myself to feed you? John jerked and turned around. His Miranda was standing on the front porch of the store. Fat, 15 years older than him, wealthy, as he now realized, very relatively, wealthy Miranda. What are you looking at? Get the bags. John saw how passers-by paid attention to them, how they smiled. He moved towards Miranda, walked over, pulled out his car keys and threw them at her. Fuck you. Find yourself another asshole. What? You've got some nerve. You won't get a dime. You can get your ass cut off in the back alley for debt. But John was already striding down the street, thinking how he could find out where Evelyn was. Certainly not in the village. She's got nowhere to live. Oh, I should have asked Kathy more. John had to go to the village. He even had to spend the night at a neighbor's house. But in 3 days he had gathered all the information he needed. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course, you see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. You know, to free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the Harris. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you. Who? It's your husband. My what? My husband. I'll be right down. You can't let him in here. She left the room and ran into James. Evelyn, your face is gone. What happened? Nothing, I'm fine. And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me? Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment. What annulment? I'll show you. The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds. What future? Do you want me to tell you? I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own. I don't get it. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious. John grinned wickedly. You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment. John couldn't take it anymore. You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're an inferior. Evelyn looked at him. If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you. John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but, for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course. You see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. You know, to free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the heiress. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you. Who? It's your husband. My what? My husband. I'll be right down. You can't let him in here. She left the room and ran into James. Evelyn, your face is gone. What happened? Nothing, I'm fine. And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me? Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment. What annulment? I'll show you. The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds. What future? Do you want me to tell you? I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own. I don't get it. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious. John grinned wickedly. You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment. John couldn't take it anymore. You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're inferior. Evelyn looked at him. If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you. John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. You all have known me since I was a little girl. I've never slacked off, never did a bad thing. And most importantly, I loved our village. I'll answer the most important questions right away. Yes, I received an inheritance. Yes, I bought back from Benjamin everything he had bought here. The crowd erupted in amazement. Wow, so now you're going to put up a factory too? Evelyn smiled. No, I wanted to consult with you. The people waited tensely. She handed out little books to everyone about the technique for the sick and told them at the same time. We can save all the nature, make a name for ourselves, make a lot of jobs. If you all say no, nothing will happen. I promise you. There was no arguing. Grandfather Mason, who was the oldest in the village, came out to the people and said, I think we can trust Evelyn. If it's true, our village will be famous all over the world. When we got back to town, we decided that we should celebrate the beginning of a successful business. James was a little too gloomy. What's the matter with you? You don't seem happy about our success. Of course I am. Except I realized one thing today. You don't need me anymore. You can do this on your own. I can leave. When we got back, I booked a ticket, leaving in the morning. Evelyn realized it was bound to happen sooner or later. But why now? Why not later someday? She could see she liked him. She couldn't let him go. James? Yes. James, could you reschedule the flight? Reschedule? Do you still need me here? Yes, I do. He shrugged. Well, he would suffer for her a little longer. It was unbearable to be around the person he was about to lose. All right, what time do you want to reschedule the flight? He picked up the phone. In the next life. In this one, I'm not letting you go. James slowly raised his eyes to her, looked at her for a long time, then said, And I don't want you to think I stayed for the money. I don't, but everyone will think so. Do you care what everyone else thinks? James smiled. Evelyn, you're just scared. You don't love me, do you? Do you? And then he blushed. And I do, but... Then I'll drop everything and come with you. In a second, Evelyn was in James's arms. He kissed her and repeated, "I've had one desire lately, to kiss you. Now for the rest of your life you'll have to put up with me around you." "And I agree." Evelyn laughed happily.